Well, fucking congratulations, Tayuya responded, rolling her eyes as they continued to run. The days passed surprisingly quickly for Sasuke's team. Day and night were spent making plans and coordinating attack strategies. By the time they reached Konoha, the group was sure they'd had all but a war room's congregation of meetings. I never thought we'd be back here so soon, Neji commented, staring at the village which had been his home for the last 16 years, never mind all the ups and downs associated with it. Feeling homesick? Tayuya asked. Not as much as I thought I might, Neji replied. Konan kept her gaze even. Her experiences with Konoha hadn't lessened. Of course, she befriended Yuri while the Sanbi Jinchuriki was allied with Konoha, but Konan still didn't have a very favorable opinion of the village. Shinobi from their village still murdered Nagato's parents. The war had devastated their land, but it wasn't like she hadn't ruined lives as well, lives that amounted to nothing now that Nagato and Yahiko's goal was impossible to achieve. Nevertheless, for the sake of peace, she was willing to set aside any animosity. Besides, after dealing with Jashin and the night close call the elemental nations had, Konan was more than willing to set aside vendettas. That said, it certainly seemed a little humorous that two former Akatsuki members would be able to enter the village unimpeded. Let's go, Sasuke said. The group nodded and headed toward the village. The closer they came, the busier they noticed the inside actually was. As expected, there were craftsmen and sculptors everywhere. Carts were carried to and fro at every cardinal direction. And yet, Konoha was less busy than the other nations. No doubt having a village that survived the massacre helped with that. The closer the group came, it didn't take them long to realize that they were expected. A group of shinobi led by Shiranui Genma greeted them. Well, aren't you a sight for sore eyes, Uchiha Sasuke? Hokage-sama didn't tell us you were coming, Genma replied. Sasuke's expression remained neutral. Because she wasn't told. Naruto will inform her upon his attending of the Cage Summit. As for our unannounced visit, I need to know if you have any records kept of Shimura Danzo. We're looking for him, Sasuke claimed. Genma blinked. Social as always, the Jonin claimed, flickering his senbon between his teeth. He then cleared his throat, taking a moment to survey the Uchiha's team. He certainly had quite the group of individuals accompanying him. Identification? He asked. Tayuya frowned. Are you fucking serious? She growled, tapping her foot impatiently. Genma shrugged. Unfortunately, we had a few imposters as of late, he replied. Tayuya snorted and revealed the side of her neck, showcasing the divine insignia of the shinigami. Sasuke revealed his own, in addition to the tattoo created by Naruto, acknowledging his authority. Konan, Neji, and Itachi swiftly followed after. Genma glanced at a Hyuga in his team for only a moment. The man nodded and the Jonin turned back to his visitors. Come on, he said, allowing them to enter the village. Sasuke and the others followed him in. They ignored the looks sent their way. It wasn't anything out of the usual. Having been making physical appearances at nearly every corner of the globe in the last few months, they'd all had more than enough time to get used to their new celebrity statuses. Of course, not every gaze was positive, but no one was willing to make untoward comments. You've been dealing with imposters? Konan asked, finding nothing better to do at the moment. There have been a few isolated incidents. Many think they can get away with matters if they mention Naruto's name. Thankfully, not many of the incidents are critical, just some troublemakers. Only 2 were more trouble than we'd anticipated. Both cases have been handled and the criminals have been imprisoned. Sorry if we're a little on edge at the moment, Genma replied. Neji's lips thinned. Sounds concerning, he answered. Genma just nodded and led Sasuke's team through the village, the group gathering a welcome amount of attention. A few children ran up to them, and Konan received them happily. Yet, the parents were notably much more cautious. It hadn't escaped the notice of any of them that while many were happy, thrilled, or compliant, just as many were scared, suspicious, and concerned. Tayuya rolled her eyes, not even bothering to bring attention to the gazes sent their way. Wordlessly, the others agreed while Genma guided them toward the Hokage mansion's archives. He led them through a number of corridors before he took them to a single room. Opening the door, the team was greeted with hundreds of bookcases lined with books, scrolls, secret documents, and maps. Weaving through a number of hand signs, Genma deactivated the security measures guarding the archives. With the seals down and no threat, he faced the group. You're welcome to all the information. If you need anyone, then I can assign a chunin to help you look through the records. I admit, it feels a little strange using such information to hunt down a former council member, but even I understand that Danzo's too loyal to Konoha to consider times such as these. No doubt he'd try to make sure Konoha stood on top of the nations even in peaceful times like these. A guy like him needs to be subdued quickly, Genma claimed. That's why we're here. We'll tell you if we need anything, Sasuke said. Genma nodded and quickly left them alone. The group of 5 scanned the room momentarily. This is gonna be a fucking headache, Tayuya glowered. Aren't you an Uzumaki? Just use clones, Conan suggested. And make my dam collapse in on itself from all the reading I'll be doing. Since when did you grow a sense of humor? She asked. Conan shrugged before Sasuke ceased their scabbling. Enough complaining. We're here to work, he said as he grabbed a book and began sifting through it. Neji and Itachi fell into step behind him with Conan not far behind. Tayuya sucked her teeth but continued onward as well. Yukimaru panted as he and Hanabi leaned against a tree off the side of the road, catching their breath following the brutal training session that Naruto had put them through. What was it with teachers and being slave masters? One wouldn't think it from Naruto's innocent visage, but the Uzumaki patriarch could be quite stern when they thought about it. Everything hurts, Yukimaru wheezed while Hanabi winced from her bruises. The young Hyuga then shivered when they both felt the ground-shaking explosion rattling off in the distance, courtesy of Naruto, Yuri, and Yura. Her young eyes marveled as flames of gold and violet waved through the air, dispersing into the sky like beautiful lines from the sun. How can they still keep fighting? We've been doing this for the last 4 hours. Hanabi gasped, watching with tired eyes. Though it pained him, Yukimaru laughed. That's Naruto ni for you. He never seems to run out of energy no matter what you throw at him. But, are you alright, Hanabi-san? Yuri-ne didn't exactly hold back against you, Yukimaru said, his eyes lingering on her injuries. The younger sister of Hyuga Hinata huffed. I'll live. Had she held back I would have been angrier. I'd rather face my shortcomings than have someone coddle me. But, thanks for asking, Hanabi said. Smiling at her compliment, Yukimaru couldn't help but slide his hand until his fingers interlaced with hers. The sudden contact startled the Hyuga heiress, but it wasn't unwelcome. She couldn't help but smile and grasped his fingers as well. Neither even had the time to notice that the explosions had stopped. Ah, isn't that cute, Yuri-ne? It seems we didn't push them hard enough if they can still do that, Yuri giggled, starting the youngsters. They pulled their hands away, their faces flushed with embarrassment. Yura came from the trees, her face caked with sweat. Don't embarrass them, Yuri. Everyone's like that at first. I'm sure you were like that with Nisama once before, Yura countered, making Yuri chuckle while Naruto came from the trees. Alright, I think that's enough training for one day. Rest up for about an hour and then we'll head out. While we're running, Yukimaru, Hanabi, we'll review the lessons we've gone over with politics. As you can tell from the sound of my voice, I'm looking forward to this about as much as you are, Naruto commented dryly. Understood, Hanabi replied. Yes, Naruto ni, Yukimaru uttered. Nodding, Naruto took a moment to exhale, allowing his summons to split from his soul following the merger. Aside from training Yukimaru and Hanabi, Naruto, Yuri, and Yura trained themselves extensively with their own methods. Over the days, Naruto finally managed some semblance of normalcy with Pakura while his proficiency and trust with the others rose to even greater heights. In particular, he found greater success with Dan and Yahiko than almost anyone else. The merger felt so natural that they were entirely one being on numerous occasions. It was a rather strange, yet fulfilling feeling. After a moment, Naruto sat down to rest only to find himself surrounded on both sides by his 2 redhead lovers. You know I'm sweaty right now, he commented. Believe me, I'm used to it, Yuri retorted. Why Yuri? Yura exclaimed, making her little sister laugh. Before the older sister could reprimand her, Naruto turned his head and captured her lips in a fierce kiss that made Yura glad she was sitting. Her legs would have gone out otherwise. Plus, his tongue invaded her mouth, striking at the very corner of her cheek and swirling around her own tongue like a coiled serpent. She kissed him back hungrily, her hand rubbing his arm slowly. I've got to be crazy if I think my older sister kissing my lover is hot. Maybe I have read one too many shoujo manga, Yuri said to herself, biting her lower lip. Fuck, she wished Yukimaru and Hanabi weren't around. She really needed to get fucked, and in the worst way. She hadn't had any sex since Naruto and Kushina started that celibacy thing. It was enough to make her go mad. She wasn't even getting married. Either way, thankfully, the Sanbi Jinchuriki's erratic thoughts were put on hold when Naruto turned to her and kissed her too. Unfortunately, the only purpose that kiss served was to lit the burning embers of passion within her and turn them into a searing inferno. So aroused was Yuri that her entire body trembled in Naruto's arms, shaking and trembling like a leaf from sheer pleasure. One of her hands rubbed his chest and the other tickled his cheek. His lips tasted so wonderful, rough, powerful, and thirsty. However, while Yuri found herself losing her mind to the pleasure, Naruto quickly became aware of what he was doing to his younger lover. He quickly came to understand that perhaps he'd neglected Yuri's need for too long. Of course, he wished to remedy that, but he didn't wish to do so when his mind was still frayed with rapture from his honeymoon, something which had been cut short. He didn't want Yuri to feel like his passion for his mother was put onto her. That said, he could also be overthinking it. He certainly missed Yuri as well, and Yura. Naruto parted slowly from Yuri, making sure his eyes stared into hers. They breathed slowly, looking at each other. Yuri's face was flushed and her body became less than a bundle of nerves. The slightest thing would no doubt set her off. If you can hold out until we arrive in Iwagakure, then I've got a special surprise for you. Something that you've always wanted to do, Naruto whispered into Yuri's ear. And Naruto ni, I can't, Yuri shivered. She raked her mind, wondering what she'd asked that the Kyuubi Jinchuriki remembered. She'd said so many things. Naruto smiled. You can, and you will, he uttered. Yuri sharply inhaled and clenched her fists. She retook control of herself with the greatest effort and slumped to the ground. This was officially the worst day of her life. You better keep that promise, Naruto ni, Yuri whined much to Naruto's amusement. Yet, off to the side, Yura watched, aroused, and greatly conflicted. Given her training and her proximity to her lover and sister, it wasn't hard to hear both of them. She wanted nothing more than to partake in the joys that Yuri and Kushina experienced, but Yura wanted to be married first. It was something she always dreamed about, giving all of herself to her husband, her one and only husband. She felt it had more meaning for her. However, it was certainly hard to stay that way when she saw the dreamy, dazed looks on Kushina and Yuri's faces. Whatever it was like, it must have been really something. And Naruto, ever observant recently, noticed this as well. He then turned to Yura. And I've got something in mind for you as well. I promise, he teased in her ear. Yura swallowed nervously. Should she, as a trained kunoichi, allow herself to be led around like this? Well, many seasoned veterans would say no, but they weren't exactly here right now. Finding his result met, Naruto finally got up and surveyed the faces of the two Uzumaki sisters, both dizzy from his seduction. He kissed them one more time and then departed to his own business. And Naruto ni's getting cocky lately, Yuri claimed. I don't think we're putting up much of a fight, however, Yura answered. Well, it wasn't like Yuri could fault that line of thinking. Following those events, a long, awkward, and cold river bath hour passed until everyone reassembled. Yuri dried her hair with a bit of a glare sent at her lover. He'd better have the best damn surprise of a lifetime or she was gonna fucking rip him to pieces. What was even worse was the fact that even through her glare, he offered her a smug smirk. She didn't even know he could do smug. Everyone ready? Naruto asked. Yes, Hanabi said. Yukimaru, Yura, and Yuri nodded after her. Good, then let's move. We should be entering the lands of Taki in 2 or 3 days. It'll take us another 3 or 4 days. If we take any longer, then I'll teleport us there. Now, let's move, Naruto ordered. The others agreed and ran off. Not long into the trip, Naruto turned to Yukimaru and Hanabi. Now, Yukimaru, do you remember what we talked about last time? The blonde asked. The younger man nodded. The art of deals and trades? He asked. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki nodded. Thus, he began to educate and teach Yukimaru and Hanabi. Days were filled with combat training and nights were filled with study and instruction. The two younger shinobi continued to ask questions while Yura and Yuri proved capable assistants by helping Naruto plan political scenarios. All of it left the two children understandably exhausted. As night settled over the northern lands of the elemental nations, Naruto looked at Yukimaru and Hanabi peacefully resting in their sleeping bags. His eyes then lingered on Yuri and Yura. He couldn't sleep, instead choosing to gaze upon the moon for a time. Well, more specifically, he was looking at the one who was looking at the moon. In a surprising show of humility, or at least humility for Otsutsuki Kagura, the clan's princess inquired for time to gaze upon the moon of her own volition. Uneasy, yet finding no reason to deny her, Naruto allowed her the time. Kagura removed herself from Naruto but briefly and floated in the sky, her pale eyes glaring at the white celestial body with nothing but anger. Don't tell me you desire another wife. You might be overreaching yourself, Naruto, Kurama suddenly said, breaking the blonde's concentration. Naruto snorted. Very funny, Kurama. No, if anything I'm a little worried. Kagura's already powerful on her own. It makes me wonder just how powerful her sister is. Even then, there's an entire clan potentially full of people like her. It just feels like it's Jashin all over again, he uttered. You do know you conquered that bastard, right? Kurama inquired, laying himself down on the floor, his white tails moving about. Naruto exhaled slowly. Not on my own. Had it not been for Shin, I wouldn't have beaten him. Plus, the guy was overconfident. If he'd taken the fight seriously, I don't think I'd have a chance in hell of beating him. Even then, too many things had to go right to give me the opening I needed. Kurama, how long can the elemental nations really go on? Given what Kagura's already told me, it won't be long before the Otsutsuki come looking for, whatever it is they're looking for, a god fruit. I just wonder what's next. What am I being prepared for? He said softly, watching Kagura continue to float there. Kurama, surprisingly, had nothing to say to the blonde's words. If anything, it didn't seem like Naruto was fishing for a reply anyway. He just continued to observe Kagura until the Otsutsuki princess seemingly had enough of glaring. She floated back to him and resided back in his sword. After a moment of silent meditation, Naruto spent a bit of time furthering his training silently. In one hand, he spawned gold flames. In the other, he spawned the violet ones. He crashed them both together, spending the better part of an hour cultivating them. They burned and tore at his soul in equal measure. It was hard to breathe and even harder to concentrate. He longed to sync up with one of his summons. Sharing the agony would be so much more preferable, yet Kurama sternly declined such an easy route. Keep working, brat. This is one thing you're gonna have to accomplish by yourself, the fox claimed. Every inhale burned Naruto's nostrils, yet he did as instructed. He didn't waver and his soul suffered under the weight of immense pressure. The flames stuck to his skin and seared their insignia onto his flesh. Not even his eyes or the insides of his body were safe. Dare the blonde even say that his very heart was being burned. When he was finally allowed to release the flames, they dispersed and he fell back in agony. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki panted, clutching his burning chest. It seemed so severe that Suiren wasn't willing to watch her summoner in pain any longer. Merging her soul with Naruto's, she shared his pain until he was strong enough to crawl back to his lovers and the children. With a word of thanks to Suiren, Naruto climbed into bed and fell asleep almost instantly. The next morning came way too soon. The pain of last night still weighed on Naruto and it showed in his steps. "Ni-sama, are you alright?" Yura asked, the others a fair ways ahead of him. Naruto inhaled and exhaled slowly. "Yeah, I'm fine. Just gimme a minute," he answered. Concerned, Yuri rushed over to him and grabbed his arm. "You sure? You look like you're about to fall over," she said, holding him up. Naruto laughed, his pride virtually in the dirt. He leaned up, his body feeling sore. With one more breath, he felt strong enough to continue onward. "You sure you're alright, Naruto ni?" Yukimaru asked worriedly. Naruto smirked. "You know me. I'm built tough, Yukimaru. I'll be fine," he replied, hoping to calm the nerves of the others. Luckily, Naruto had no idea how right he would be in a few minutes. The longer they journeyed over the road, the more Naruto started to feel better. In fact, he started to feel even better than he did yesterday. He was bursting with energy, so much so that he had to contain himself as Yuri and Yura warned him of Yukimaru and Hanabi. The two children were wheezing trying to keep up with him. Sorry," he claimed. Opting for some leisure, Naruto slowed the pace much to the delight of Yukimaru and Hanabi. Of course, that didn't the Naruto, or Yura, from continuing Hanabi and Yukimaru's training in politics, even if it was irksome. "Alright, Yukimaru, when someone speaks to you and asks you to Whatever Naruto was going to say next died in his throat. His eyes narrowed and the smile on his face quickly turned into a deep frown. Even Kurama leaned up and growled, followed by the kindred and Morio. Hell, even the others became aware of the mysterious sense in the air. What the hell is that? Yahiko asked, frowning as he honed in a very strange presence. I don't know, but I feel it as well. Whatever it is, it's powerful. Almost absurdly so. It's like one of those corrupted humans that Jashin used. No, stronger perhaps, Pakura questioned, narrowing her eyes. Dan leaned up, sharing Naruto's senses with the others. They all saw the open road, nary a soul in sight. Yet, this presence feels similar. Almost similar to the former Jonin from Konoha. Paused his thought, turning his head toward Kagura. The princess of the Otsutsuki clan frowned deeply. Just as the others, she saw what Naruto saw. Though there was nothing on the road, it was clear to her that there was indeed the presence of two, no three Otsutsuki headed their way. However, the strange part was that Kagura had grown in the depths of Otsutsuki culture. Trained by her parents to lead the clan at some point, she was well versed in reading the strength of various clan members. And yet, if she had a real body, she would have been sweating. Even for her, this Otsutsuki presence felt disturbingly vast, perhaps even vaster than the summoner she was tied to. But how was that possible? It seemed that Kagura would get her answer as Naruto suddenly stopped. He then grabbed his sword. Naruto ni? Yukimaru asked, drawing the attention of the others. Immediately, Yura and Yuri knew something was wrong. There were very few times that their lover wore such chilling expressions. Ni-sama, what's wrong? Yura inquired. Something's coming. Stick close to me, the blonde said. Hanabi and Yukimaru exchanged looks. They couldn't sense anything out of the ordinary. Surprisingly, neither could Yura or Yuri. However, they'd certainly be more than a little foolish if they disregarded Naruto's senses. Do you know how far away? Yura asked. Naruto shook his head, drawing 2 fingers over his sword. No, but that's what I'm gonna find out, he said as he summoned Kimimaro, Pakura, and Dan. The 3 spirits flew off while Naruto commanded the group to keep walking. He situated himself, Yura, and Yuri around Hanabi and Yukimaru as they continued onward. Should we really be pushing forward when we don't know where the enemy is? Hanabi questioned. Naruto didn't respond immediately. Instead, he'd been placing his all into pinpointing the tense feeling that came upon the group. Unfortunately, not even he was having much success. Even though he could see what Pakura, Kimimaro, and Dan saw, there didn't seem to be anything out of the ordinary. The roads were clear, the trees were blowing in the wind, animals were going about their own lives, and the lands were a display of utter peace across the horizon. Suffice to say, it was all perfect. If there was anything Naruto was thankful for, it was that he wasn't alone in this feeling of unease. Kurama and the others, even after an entire hour passed, had not felt the disturbing aura subside. Had Naruto been on his own, he would have thought he just imagined the whole thing. However, it wasn't long before Naruto heard Yuri snarl. I sense it too, Yuri claimed. Yura widened her eyes. She looked back at her sister. As typical of Jinchuriki, Yuri's pupils turned to slits. Within her, the Sanbi growled. As much as it was a blow to his pride, Isobu realized that he'd somehow missed the threat when Kurama hadn't. What are you sensing? Yura asked, already attempting to gather what little of the golden violet flames she was able to master. Even as an Uzumaki, she still had trouble sensing whatever they were supposed to be looking for. It's hard to explain. It's like standing at the very bottom of the ocean worried that the pressure's gonna tear you apart, but it doesn't, Yuri explained. She wasn't sure if she could provide anything better than that. In an odd way, it was sort of similar to Jashin's presence. Not quite as foreboding or vile, but certainly chaotic, almost infinitely so. Naruto ni, what do we do? Yukimaru asked. Yeah, that was the question of the hour, wasn't it? On one hand, Naruto thought to just teleport Yukimaru and Hanabi out of harm's way. Given that this was the middle of nowhere, there were no guarantees that he could get back to this spot. There was also no guarantee that this presence would stay here. Could he leave a spirit here? Yes, he could do that as well. Yet, there was something within him that warned him against this path. It was the same foreboding feeling that warned him when he, Gurren, and Komachi. Finally, Naruto turned to them. I'm going to teleport you guys to the nearest Iwagakure town. I'll stay here alone, the blonde suggested. The hell you will, Naruto ni. Yuri clamored angrily. Naruto faced her. I need to investigate this, and you guys need to make sure Yukimaru and Hanabi get to Iowa safely. We don't. Yuri expected Naruto to retort more, but he swiftly paused. Yukimaru and Hanabi remained silent as they watched the others converse. Both found themselves stilled by his silence. The glare on his face slowly softened until no trace of it was left. The patriarch of the Uzumaki clan then turned his head back to the road. Ni-sama? Yura asked. Never mind. Come on, he said, continuing to walk down the road. To say that Yura and Yuri were confused was an understatement. He seemed so ready to tear into Yuri the very valid reasons why they should leave the matter to him, yet, now he just as quickly dismissed the thought and allowed them to come. Why'd he change his mind? Hanabi asked. Unfortunately, no one had the answer, and no matter how they asked, Naruto didn't answer them. The group must have walked for about half an hour in trepidation. At some point, Yura began to sense the invasive comers as well. However, at this point, there was hardly much for them except frown when they saw two robed figures gingerly walking over the hillside. As soon as Naruto laid eyes on them, he stopped. He held up his hand and the others stopped as well. Once they stopped, Yuri quickly noticed that the two weren't alone. In the hands of one of them by the ethereal neck lay Kimimaro, a chain of amber fire wrapped around his neck. His eyes seemed to stare into a never-ending void, unaware of anything going on around him. Not only did they manage to capture Naruto-ni's summon, but they also managed to subdue it as well. Great, the only thing worse than violent beasts, is violent beasts that can think, Yuri thought to herself. She clenched her fists while Yukimaru and Hanabi swallowed nervously. It was immediately then that the latter realized Naruto was right. Being so close, it was nearly impossible not to sense the power of the two men. It was suffocating. She could hardly even breathe. Hell, even the Hyuga heiress vision had begun to grow blurry. Try as she might, she couldn't help but stumble back and forth, prompting Yukimaru to grab her and hold her in his arms. Why? They look so unassuming. Hardly even a threat at all, and yet, I feel like I'm being crushed into 1,000 pieces. So why aren't they attacking us? Is Naruto-san trying to assess the threat? But there isn't. Out of the corner of her eye, Hanabi quickly realized the problem. The lands of Taki that they were currently passing through lay just on the border of the lands of Iowa. Given the terrain and the mountainous road path that they'd taken, she got a beautiful look at the valley below, recognizing two towns fairly close together. Under the untrained eye, they seemed more like a city than anything else. However, it was obvious that tradesmen and caravans were going about their mutual exchanges down there. Shinobi were paramount, maintaining the law and order established from the peace of the lives of millions. Hanabi glared back at the robed figures. Just great, she thought to herself. Alright, I'm here. Let him go, Naruto warned, his eyes quickly burning with the furiously cold might of the shinigami. While Hanabi had no idea who Naruto was talking about, Yuri, and Yukimaru understood. They continued to watch silently as the robed figures made nary a move. Had they not been moving prior, one might assume them to be statues. For a lower life form, you possess great insight. As expected of a lower heir, the one on the left said. Based on the deep tone and large frame, Naruto surmised this one to be a man. That likely meant that the smaller one who was holding Kimimaro was a woman. Then again, that person could be a man as well. The robe wasn't doing much for identification. That the case, Naruto didn't miss that insult thrown his way. Oh, I'll show you a lower life form. Yuri hissed before Naruto touched her shoulder. She looked at him and stilled when the ground beneath his feet trembled. I said, let him go, Naruto all but ordered. The robed figure remained silent for a moment. Naruto then saw the flaming amber chain around Kimimaro's neck fade away. Regaining his senses, Kimimaro immediately flew back to Naruto. I have failed you, Shikyo-sama, Kimimaro said, holding his head low. He then faded out of view, returning residence in Naruto's blade with the others. Naruto took a moment to collect himself. This entire situation seemed so outside the norm. While he'd been speaking to Yuri, Pakura and Dan returned to him with news of Kimimaro's capture. Not only could the robed figures see them, but they also subdued one of them. Just that alone made Naruto wary. However, he was also told to not bother with any techniques. Yet, despite the threat, Pakura and Dan mentioned that the two simply wished to speak with the summoner of the shinigami, and all parties accompanied with him. Kurama, Kagura, either of you know these guys? Naruto asked. The fox gave a snarl filled with his vicious teeth. Had I known, I would have told you when I sensed them. They're an enigma even to me, the Kyuubi said, frowning. They are Otsutsuki. However, they bear much mystery even to me. I have never sensed clan members like these two. By their posture, they are confident. They speak of you as a lower heir. Though versed in numerous texts and scrolls, I know not what this means. You should exercise caution. Even under the standard of the Otsutsuki, they are abnormal, Kagura warned. Naruto didn't much like those comments. How would be abnormal amongst a clan of supposed celestial beings? Even then, Naruto briefly wondered if he had to worry about Kagura betraying him in favor of her clan members. If she joined them, then the matter would be that much more concerning. Although, by initial impressions, it seemed that Kagura didn't have a favorable opinion of them. Why are you here? Naruto finally asked. The taller robed figure shifted. That it took you such a significant time to locate us is disappointing. Given that the Great Will wished to evaluate your worth, we find you, lacking even for a lower life form. We struggle to reason why you might be called an heir, even a lower one. However, by your current aptitude, it's clear that you bested the slaughter god not by your own power. The scars on your soul confirm it, he said. Immediately, Kagura frowned. The others raised their eyebrows in confusion. What the hell's the Great Will? Yahiko questioned. The Great Will, the name of the figure who is considered as the ultimate, supreme deity of our clan. He was the first, and only, to ascend into godhood. Through thousands of deaths, rebirths, and ascensions he reached that pinnacle. So powerful has he been that tales claim he has created universes with but a thought of his own, Kagura claimed. Pakura glanced at the princess of the Otsutsuki main branch. Wouldn't that put this guy even above the shinigami? She asked. Unfortunately, Kagura didn't answer that. What she did answer was Suiren's inquiry. And what is the name of this person? Speak not names that you are not prepared to withstand, for with great names comes even greater power and attention. I shall not see us turn to waste to sat your own curiosity, Kagura voiced, not even bothering to address them by looking at them. Having not known the celestial woman for long, the others were too sure how to feel out all of her personality, but she almost sounded scared. What could scare even her? After all, she was an Otsutsuki. Shouldn't this news make her happy? As for Naruto, he remained calm, even if his jaw tightened beneath his lips at the insults. Yuri scowled and Yura clenched her fists. Hanabi and Yukimaru continued to look on cautiously. Okay, aside from insulting me, what else are you here for? Naruto asked, laying his hand on his sword. The smaller of the two shifted only momentarily, but a hand from the taller one ceased any further advance. The taller then took a step forward, stretching his hand out to the group. Rejoice, lower life form. Though you are but a lower heir, the Great Will has set his gaze on you. By your gaze, you have already identified us. Know that the Great Will has risen above the petty squabbles of what our clan has become. Greater ascension demands greater attention. Had it not been for your worth, our feet would not have deemed this land worthy to be stepped on. As you are now, you alone are incapable of protecting this planet from the Otsutsuki. Your battle has drawn their gaze and their interest in your world. They shall fall upon you in the future, and all you have worked for shall be taken away. This is neither pride nor arrogance, the Great Will has foreseen your demise, the taller one said. Naruto's lips thinned. Of course, most of what they were saying hadn't been new to him. He already discussed, in great length, the possibility of the Otsutsuki returning to the cage. The villages were already beginning training programs to increase their prowess. However, to be told that the demise of their world was certain was a threat that the blonde couldn't take lightly. Is that right? And why should you guys care what happens to our world? Naruto asked. The robed figure lowered his hand only momentarily. We do not. We have made our stance on the matter clear. However, the Great Will must be obeyed. To resist is the purest folly. The Great Will has a vested interest in you, and it knows that you care for this planet and its people, being a lower life form yourself. To that end, the Great Will is willing to protect your planet and people from certain destruction. All you need do is forsake pledge obedience to him, the taller one said. Yuri snorted. Sheesh, with guys like these who needs businessmen? Isobu warns against it, Naruto ni, Yuri claimed. The Sanbi had been speaking to her throughout the whole ordeal. The entire matter screamed of dangerous things beyond what even the Biju knew. The same could be said of the Kyuubi and Morio. Being beings associated with the demonic or evil superstitions, both were well aware of deals that seemed too good to be true, especially those from revered beings. What was worse was that the robed figure spoke with such confidence that it was hard to tell if he was lying. It could also be that they thought they were telling the truth but their benefactor had less than noble intentions. I don't believe it either. While we've never seen or interacted with the Otsutsuki on our own, Kagura provided extensive knowledge of their culture. Perhaps they are different, but there's simply too much to consider to make a deal like that. Even then, I doubt Shinigami-sama would allow such a thing, Yura claimed. Naruto closed his eyes, his thoughts running wild for a little while until he opened his eyes again. Are you the ones who attacked Sasuke, Kakashi-sensei, and Yugao? He asked. Yura and Yuri's eyes widened in realization. They hadn't even thought to consider a matter like that. It could have been that they were hoping to see how powerful the forces of their world were at the moment. Yet, if they were the ones who attacked Sasuke and the others, then clearly that meant the group only lived because they sought no further qualms. Unexpectedly, it was the shorter of the two that replied. A meaningless endeavor. Aside from you, the rest of these lower lifeforms offer nothing of interest. Even we are not allowed to enter this plane for too long a time. Doing so would tear the very strands of this universe to pieces. Had you not slacked in your role, perhaps you would have reached a level close to ours. Suffice to say, your friend would not have survived he encountered us. Even should we hold back to the bare minimum he wouldn't last. For that, he should be thankful, the smaller person said. As Naruto expected, this one seemed to be a woman from the feminine tone of the voice. She also sounded a lot more impatient than the man was. There was a haughtiness to her tone that Naruto had grown used to from numerous nobles. They speak the truth of that matter. The might which I sense from them, the Uchiha would have been unable to withstand. However, their attack still lies upon the celestial body that holds Kagaya. I sense the presence there still, Kagura claimed. Before Naruto could speak further, the taller robed figure spoke. We have offered you the matter from the Great Will. As foretold to us, being a lower life form you would refuse this great opportunity now. Thus, we shall take our leave. Though we have no reason to, we shall impart one last piece of information to you. The course that the Uchiha walks is a dangerous one. Assist him and he shall live, deny our advice and he shall die. Naruto's eyes swiftly enlarged as did the others. He couldn't even more in time before the two figures faded out of existence right in front of him. With them, the overwhelming pressure dissipated as well. Sasuke-san's in danger? Yukimaru asked. It could be a ploy. Maybe they're tiring to send Naruto somewhere. Hanabi inquired. Yura hummed. It's possible, but it doesn't sound like a lie. Also, Sasuke-san's hardly weak. He's one of the strongest shinobi of our generation. Who could beat him? The older sister pondered, scratching her chin with her finger. Naruto ni, what mission do you have Sasuke on? Yuri asked. Naruto frowned. He's supposed to be looking into Danzo and where that guy's hiding. It could be a number of things, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki ascertained. Well, Naruto ni can't follow Sasuke-san all the time. He still has to appear for the cage summits, Yukimaru urged, gathering nods from the others. Kindred, you guys follow Sasuke and his team. Help them if needed and let me know if you find anything strange. In fact, hunt Danzo with them. It might make the mission a whole lot faster, Naruto ordered. Inside his mindscape, Lamb stood to her feet and grabbed her bow while Wolf offered a toothy grin. Understood, Shikyo-sama, Lamb said. Quickly summoning the pair, Naruto sent them off. Lamb and Wolf flew through the air and vanished over the horizon at great speeds, honing in on Sasuke's unique signature. In less than a second, they'd be back in Konoha where the Uchiha and his team rested. You sure you should send only one? Yura asked. Naruto nodded. Yeah, besides, they're my best option for helping Sasuke without overwhelming him right now. Besides, knowing Tem, if I baby him he'll talk my ears off. If he needs more help than that, I'll know. Now, I'm gonna investigate the area. The rest of you stay on guard. Once I'm done, we're getting the hell outta here, the patriarch of the Uzumaki clan said. Best news I've heard all day, Hanabi expressed. Of all the things she'd been expecting today, this was definitely not one of them. Unfortunately for Naruto, there wasn't anything to find from the robed Otsutsuki who had been standing in front of his group. It was like they never existed at all. Even with 4 Uzumaki sensing the surroundings, there was nothing to find. Not even Kagura or Kurama provided any help in that regard. All that was there was the 2 towns that unknowingly became hostages. Upon finding nothing, Naruto finally decided to give up the matter. He thought to command some spirits to patrol the outer limits of the planet, but something told him that it would be a fruitless matter. If those 2 somehow got past his mother and him, then they wouldn't be found if they didn't want to be. Gathering his lovers and the young ones together, Naruto opened a portal and stepped inside, the others walking in behind him. Immediately, the portal opened in front of the tall gates of Iwagakure. The guards there quickly stood in front of the portal. By now, they'd grown rather used to the dark, swirling, pulsing void that had teleported so many of them to and fro. Of course, many of them still had apprehensions about the son of Konoha's Yondaime entering the village. Even fewer were happy with him having as much power and authority as he did, but no one else was willing to answer the call of duty. Hell, no one was willing to argue with the shinigami otherwise either. A few Jonin and a handful of Chunin stood in front of the portal, civilians hoping to enter the village marveling at the interaction. Many gasped in shock as they saw the mediator of the cage step out with his entourage. "I'll never get used to that," Hanabi said, rubbing her shoulders and frowning when she saw the amusement on Yukimaru's face. In the meantime, Naruto noticed a familiar Jonin step forward. "Do you always have to be dramatic, Naruto-sama? How are we supposed to calm these people down now?" he said, making Naruto notice the awestruck masses that had gathered into the village for the cage summit. It was good for business after all, and business had to start booming. On the usual, Naruto wouldn't have minded a little banter. But right now, there were more pressing matters to consider. "Are the cage all here? I need them assembled," Naruto urged, his tone straightening the postures of many. There were a few murmurs throughout the civilian populace, merchants at the ready to begin trading information and stories. The Jonin cleared his throat. "Not all of them, Naruto-sama. You've actually arrived fairly early. Kazekage-sama, Mizukage-sama, and Hokage-sama have yet to arrive," he said. Naruto sucked his teeth and sighed. "Fine, then go tell the Tsuchikage and the Raikage that I need to meet with them immediately," the blonde claimed. The Jonin frowned, unnerved by the grave seriousness in the Kyuubi Jinchuriki's tone. However, he had not the authority to oppose an order from him of all people. "I understood. Send word to Lady Tsuchikage and Lord Raikage immediately," the Jonin ordered. 4 Chunin separated themselves from the group and quickly obeyed. Immediately, they dashed into the unstable, yet steadily building constructs of Iwagakure. After 5 minutes, they returned with news that the Tsuchikage and Raikage were awaiting Naruto's entrance. Having already gone through the proper protocols for identification, Naruto, Yuri, Yura, Yukimaru, and Hanabi were granted access to the village. "I admit, I understand that all the nations are rebuilding, but in the academy, the teachers always boasted of the grandeur of our enemies, Iwagakure, and their marvelous infrastructure. It's hard to imagine that military behemoth has been reduced to this. However, I'm impressed that construction has managed to grip the nation once again," Hanabi claimed. "I always wanted to visit Iwagakure when I was younger." Guren-san claimed they had these delicious desserts called rock pies. "Maybe we'll get some one of these days," Yukimaru answered. Hanabi rolled her eyes, the 2 young children taking their fill of the land of rock. After the day's events, they would have liked nothing more than to go to a hotel, inn, or whatever they had available and just relax for the rest of the day. Unfortunately, by Naruto's increasing steps, that seemed unlikely. Unbeknownst to them, Naruto didn't appreciate doing this any more than they did. He wanted Yukimaru and Hanabi to bond and have their own time in Iwagakure instead of thrusting them into the harsh, time-consuming environment of the political arena. However, the matter required precedence and Naruto vowed to make it up to them later. Arriving at what was to be the Tsuchikage's mansion, a rather tall building with multiple floors made of wood, a shadow of its former grandeur, Naruto was led inside. "All right, Yukimaru, Hanabi, this is earlier than I really wanted for either of you, but we're gonna be putting some of the techniques you learned into practice. Listen and learn," Naruto claimed. "Understood. Got it, Naruto ni. Kuretsuchi-sama, the mediator has arrived," a separate Jonin said. Yeah, I know. Let him in," Kuretsuchi announced from behind the door. Hanabi and Yukimaru quickly glanced at each other. That certainly wasn't what they'd planned. Even Hanabi, having been trained in the political arena before Yukimaru, was a little taken aback by the apparent Tsuchikage's abrasive language. Her father had always instilled in her politeness and noble speech, especially amongst the world leaders. That they didn't seem to reciprocate was an interesting turnabout. It's good to know that Kuretsuchi-san hasn't changed. Yura chuckled as the Iwa-Jonin immediately bowed and left. Naruto opened the door and stepped inside. He immediately noticed Kuretsuchi and Ai around the conference table, their guards, Akatsuchi and Darui respectively, standing behind them. The Tsuchikage eyed the mediator for only a moment before she turned her gaze toward the others who joined him. You know, if this is payback for us spoiling your honeymoon, then I gotta admit that you're more childish than I thought. It's a little funny but a little annoying at the same time, she said, leaning back in her chair. Laughing, Naruto entered the room. Well, it wasn't exactly you guys that ruined that part, at least not majorly. Besides, I'll just consider it as accruing vacation time, the blonde said. I leaned his sizable frame over the table. Do you even know what accruing means, boy? He asked. Despite himself, Darui smirked while Naruto grumbled. Of course I know what it means. Naruto growled. How the hell was he still being treated like an idiot? Even more than that, who spread the word that he used to be an idiot in the first place? The blonde then glared when he heard a chuckle behind him. He turned his head and saw Hanabi covering her mouth with a closed fist. He then looked at Yura, and Yukimaru, all three of whom found various parts of the council room interesting. Well, I guess it's good that our mediator isn't as big an idiot as people think he is, Kuretsuchi joked much to Naruto's chagrin. After a moment, the blonde finally settled the humor in the room by pulsing the density of his aura. Nearly everyone shivered as the summoner of the shinigami called for their attention. While a crude method to gather attention, he had to bring back the eyes of everyone to the severity of the situation he'd just experienced. Make fun of me later. I wanted to meet with you guys to let you know that once the others arrive, we'll be meeting immediately. Make sure you clear up your schedules because we're gonna be busy, Naruto ordered. The Tsuchikage and Reikage leaned up when Naruto released the pressure. They looked at him a little surprised by his show of might, yet it served as a proper reminder that he was still the most powerful guy walking the face of the earth currently. Perhaps they were just lucky that he was willing to be made a joke every once in a while. I scowled, not so used to being humbled in such a way. And what is this supposed to mean? You have news about this guy on the moon who attacked the Uchiha? I inquired. Naruto spared the dark-skinned man a look only briefly. Not exactly. By the looks of it, we've got worse than him coming our way, the Kyuubi Jinchuriki uttered, unleashing a wave of tense unease through the room. Say what? Kuretsuchi exclaimed, slamming her hands on the table. What the fuck was even going on? Less than a year and they now had to worry about invading alien species. When did shinobi matters become so damn complicated? And what does that mean? I asked. While this news surprised him, he decided that a calmer approach was needed given the outburst of the Tsuchikage. He was furious as well, perhaps even more than Kuretsuchi, yet it wouldn't do well to have them all crazy. That's something I want to discuss once all 5 of the cage are present. It's a lot of information to speak through and even more to explain the implications. If we're not careful with how we handle this, it could spiral the rest of the nations into dissent. That's why I want to keep this as close to the chest as possible. The only reason I'm speaking on it right now is because it happened not even 30 minutes ago. I'm being upfront with you guys. Nothing good going to come from hiding anything from you. Just be prepared, we're gonna be here a while, the blonde warned. Having a moment to compose herself, Kuretsuchi leaned back. Fucking damn it, she mumbled to herself. Honestly, she really wanted to give up this job. Unfortunately, she didn't believe her grandfather to be of the right mindset. He was still pretty bitter about such close relations between the nations, but he hadn't experienced what Kuretsuchi had. There were a few Iwa shinobi who shared his mindset, but the vast majority had no desire for war, already having an idea of where the consequences would lead them. The horror still kept some awake. What's our timetable? Kuretsuchi then asked. At this point, she just wanted to rip the bandage off. Better to see the scar and know what to do than to simply pray and never know what you were dealing with. Naruto paused momentarily. Hanabi and Yukimaru looked between everyone with apprehension. They suddenly felt very small considering everything. Let's just say I won't give you a guarantee it can't happen in as little as 5 years, Naruto claimed. Kuretsuchi sucked her teeth. Just fucking great. How is it that as soon as you show up everything turns to shit? She inquired. Naruto snorted. Would you prefer I not be here? He asked. The Tsuchikage rolled her eyes, not even bothering to answer such a question. Yeah, alright, please go while I nurse this damn headache that I've got, she claimed. Shrugging his shoulders, Naruto led his group out of the room. Left alone, I watched Kuretsuchi slam her forehead on the table. Tsuchikage-sama, it's rude to bang your head on a table like that, Akatsuchi warned. Quote. Fuck off. It's my office. I'll slam my head on whatever I want. Besides, I think I've earned it after the news we've been given, Kuretsuchi answered, her voice mumbled by the taste of sweet, wooden table. After a moment, she turned her head and looked out the window. Honestly, was this whole peace thing really going to work out? What had to be done to just live happy, non-suffering lives? Raikage, you really think the guy's not gonna crack under all the pressure? Without him, we kinda have no prayer of lasting against these guys that are supposed to be coming, the young Tsuchikage claimed. Surprised to find himself being addressed, the muscular Raikage looked at the young girl. Her tired look reminded him that she was barely even 17, not at the age to be handling such heavily political and international matters. Ordinarily, he would have thought her likely to step down. There was no shame in that. Sometimes, a young one wasn't ready for so much responsibility. Yet, other times, the circumstances forced them to be ready. An answer like that, only time will tell, the Raikage said, standing to his feet. With the matter concluded for now, he had to head to his own embassy building and settle matters for the meeting. He also needed to meet with several advisors. Suffice to say, this was going to be a long one. I warn you but once, false god. Stay away from my summoner. Should I see your prophet stand before him again, I shall not be lenient, the shinigami said, absently floating within the realm granted by the shadow that rested behind the light of his mother. The shinigami had seen the entire spectacle that came upon his summoner. In fact, the god of death was aware that the two Otsutsuki prophets had always been there. He bothered not with telling his summoner simply because he knew that Naruto would not be ready to contend with such forces, at least not with putting his world at risk. The devastation would have destroyed his summoner's spirit and he wouldn't have been able to handle the future that followed. The shinigami also knew that the intruders meant what they said. They sought no engagement with Naruto. Doing so would have brought its own troubles on them, especially given that their existences couldn't stay in a place like Naruto's without distorting everything around it. The only thing that the shinigami didn't know was the purpose of the false god in attempting to recruit his summoner. However, more infuriating than the blatant disrespect that the shinigami felt with trying to take his summoner away from him, it was the blatant disregard of his presence. The false god remained seated in his temple, constantly meditating. That seemed to be all he'd done ever since he'd acquired the power to ascend to this plane. The shinigami wasn't sure what his mother purposed in her heart to keep this being around. He was arrogant, a ruiner, and a usurper of authority. He made plans, and he never tried to hide them. Yet, his mother always calmed the shinigami's inquiries with but a statement. Everything in its season, my son. Even for the shinigami, he found his mother's need of parables and roundabouts a little grating on the nerves. Yet, he always respected her opinion. After all, powerful though he was, he knew that even he was below this false god. Such a thought was irritating in and of itself. Only his mother had the might to keep him chained down. For how long was another concern. I hadn't given you authority to enter my chambers, Shinigami. Leave at once while I am lenient, the false god replied, his eyes closed and his thoughts centered. His hair, almost as if composed of lightning and celestial stars, flowed behind his head. His robe was like bright fire while his face was as cold as the void. Your lenience is a non-factor. Though you stand in my mother's shadow, know that you have yet to ponder the very depths of eternity as I and my siblings have. Dare you to test me and provoke my summoner again, I shall show your prophets the depths by which cannot be fathomed, the shinigami said, his eyes steeled on his target. Though no power was uttered between the both of them, the threat and implications held enough weight. Having said his piece, the shinigami turned around and set to leave this side of eternity's shadow. Tell me, Shinigami, does the god of death fear the cold embrace of his own realm? The false god inquired. The shinigami paused but a moment. His eyes hardened. A brief crack from his irritation appeared on the floor. Such a weight was more than enough to crush a planet into cosmic dust. He then closed his eyes momentarily, aware of what the false god was proclaiming against him. What did it mean, if even the god of death should face death itself? Come when you wish and search the matter yourself, the shinigami claimed before he left, vanishing without a single trace. Understanding that he was alone, the false god opened his eyes, namely all three of them. The left eye was vastly different from the right, almost as if light and darkness were between them. The right was pupil-less, almost as if taken from the eye of a hyuga. In his third eye lay the Rinnegan. No, perhaps even something beyond the dojutsu wielded by the former leader of the Akatsuki. Taking a moment to move, he scratched his beard, his fingers glazing through the hair as if he touched soft grass. The horns on his head, like a crown on a king, glimmered in the low light. Uzumaki Naruto, the one being who seems to have gods and entities clamoring over you with every breath. Is not the sword heavy to swing for the one who sees not the target? He asked, closing his eyes once again to ponder the mysteries beyond the mortal plane. Chapter 93. Quote, "It's never too late to become who you want to be. I hope you live a life that you're proud of, and if you find that you're not, I hope you have the strength to start over." F. Scott Fitzgerald. Yura frowned as she watched Naruto sitting at his desk, an immense stack of papers lying in front of him. Ever since he'd left the Tsuchikage's mansion, he'd spent much of his time in their room, thinking over plans for these invaders and the coming Otsutsuki. It was obvious to her that he hadn't gotten much sleep, especially given the bags under his eyes. He must have been talking with Kurama and Kagura at every opportunity. Clearly, the weight of such immense responsibility was hanging upon him. After a while, Yura slowly exhaled and boldly walked over to him. He was so out of sorts that he jumped when she grabbed the quill he'd been using to write. "Ni-sama, you need to stop. Look at yourself. You've hardly gotten any sleep in the last 5 days. The Hokage, Mizukage, and Kazekage are set to come in just a few days. How will you have a conference if you collapse, too tired to warn anyone?" Yura asked. His concentration broken, Naruto exhaled and a terrible exhaustion fell over him. "Yura-chan, gimme back the quill. I'll stop soon. But I need to use the time we have," Naruto remarked. He could only sigh when he saw Yura shake her head, putting the quill far away. She then pointed to their bed, a simple weaving of tree materials with woven furs for sheets. "Ni-sama, you know how powerful those two were. Even if they were to attack, it won't be soon. If they wanted to attack, there would have been no better time than then, when we were all unaware. Everyone's taking the threat seriously, and the world leaders will lean on your every word. We all will. But you won't be protecting anyone like this. Sleep and spend some time outside. We will be prepared. We will," Yura claimed, hammering her point home with emphasis. Naruto opened his mouth to speak but quickly closed it. With his tired eyes, he surveyed the mess of the desk he was using. Wooden bowls where food once resided littered its surface by the dozens. He also noticed that he hadn't changed his clothes since he entered Iwagakure. Finally, he acquiesced. Standing up shakingly, Naruto rubbed his head. "You always know what to say, don't you?" he asked. Smiling, Yura blushed. "Less talking, more sleeping. And, don't even think about going to that table in the morning. Until the rest of the cage arrive, you're going to spend some time outside. I'm sure we can find something to entertain us for the next few days," Yura claimed. Naruto yawned, stretching his tired body out. Feeling a few bones snap here and there, he laughed. "Well, I think I can agree to that under one condition," he claimed. Yura raised an eyebrow, suspicious of her lover's tired smile. Though his entire body screamed exhaustion, his eyes remained playful. "What condition?" she asked slowly, narrowing her eyes. Before Yura could blink, Naruto had her in his arms. She looked at him, swallowing nervously. "Sleep with me. I'll sleep faster if you're around," he said, flashing those damned pearly whites at her. What? Sleep by yourself, Ni-sama?" Yura stammered while Naruto chuckled. "That's my condition. Take it or leave it, Yura-chan." "I think you've forgotten how stubborn I can be," Naruto whispered into her ear, turning Yura's body into utter jelly. "And Ni-sama," Yura gasped, especially when she felt his fingers dig into her waist. Her lips quivered and she tried to look away lest she be captured by his gaze. How such a gaze could be so alluring despite being so lifeless. Unfortunately, she was forced to look at him when he cupped her chin and pulled her gaze back to him. Naruto's smile widened. I just wanted us to sleep. What are you thinking? He asked. His question seemed so innocent in nature, yet like a forest set on fire so were Uzumaki Yura's thoughts. She still remembered the alluring male scent he naturally possessed that she smelled whenever they woke up together. She'd masturbated to that scent so many times. It was so strong and overpowering, drawing her in like a helpless damsel even if she was a capable kunoichi. Fine. Let me go. Now go wash your face. You smell, Yura said, pushing herself out of his grasp. She had to get out of there before she did something she came to regret. Naruto laughed but accepted and went to wash up. By the time he returned, he noticed Yura already in the bed, her clothes resting on a chair off to the side. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki grinned and slipped into the bed with her. So like him, he couldn't resist holding her close. Her body was so soft and pleasant, and her legs lay intertwined with his. Do you have to hold me that close? I'm not gonna disappear, she said. A little surprised, Yura noticed that she didn't receive a reply. After a moment, she heard the sound of her lover's soft breaths against the nape of her neck. He'd already fallen asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Yura briefly looked at him and noticed what she assumed. He was out cold, hardly a word spoken. It seemed that he didn't even have the strength to wish her a good night. That said, she wouldn't hold it against him this time. In fact, she was more pleased with this than anything else. He tightened his grip on her a little more, holding her close and making her body meld into his. He felt warm and strong. So powerful were his arms, and so secure did she feel. She fell asleep as well, sweet dreams coursing through her mind as the night in Iwagakure drew long. While the two lovers rested, the sun began to set high in the sky. Slowly, the doorknob to Naruto's room twisted until it opened. Yuri poked her head through the door and noticed her sister sleeping with her lover. The Sanbi Jinchuriki snuck in slowly and puffed out her cheeks. Oh sure, you don't sleep with me when it's my turn, but you sleep when it's her turn. I'm hurt, Naruto ni. Absolutely devastated, Yuri exclaimed dramatically, holding a hand over her wounded heart while her face grimaced in mock anguish. You have no reason to worry. The girl has not known the touch of a man just yet, the Sanbi claimed. Yuri nearly faltered for a moment. You can sense that? She inquired. It's not particularly hard. You humans are unaware but you females possess different sense based on whether you've known the opposite sex or not. Far as I've seen, even should unorthodox relationships be formed, the scent is not quite so notable as with your so-called traditional matters, Isobu mentioned while Yuri recovered from her surprise. The Sanbi Jinchuriki wasn't exactly keen on acquiring a skill of smelling whether someone was a virgin or not. Then again, it'd certainly help when she had her own children. She just had to get fucked again to get them. Sighing to herself, Yuri shook her head and adjusted her mindset. She knew Naruto was extremely busy. He was also very concerned about Sasuke and the others. He also had to worry about making plans for the Otsutsuki. Plus, he had to handle the matters related to the Cage Summit. Yuri had tried to get Naruto to get some sleep as well, but clearly her sister had a better way with words than she did. She also couldn't bring herself to wake them up given how peaceful they seemed. Grr, you win this time, Urine, Yuri said. She slipped through the room and kissed Naruto on the cheek. She then slipped out of the room as quickly as she came. Unknown to her, Yura opened one of her eyes for only a moment. The older sister heard the younger come in and found her curiosity piqued. Instead of what she was expecting, Yuri simply kissed their shared lover and left. It was a shame. Yura, feeling oddly playful, wouldn't have minded scaring her sister. Oh well, that would have to happen some other time. Briefly turning her head, Yura noticed Naruto still sleeping. His breath teased the nape of her neck, and his arms held her so possessively. So close did he hold her that she swallowed nervously, feeling the full weight of his erection digging into the crevice of her ass. Every shiver of his body only moved it up and down against her. Her legs trembled against the material that made up their bed. MMMMNHGH. Ni-sama, Yura whispered. She'd seen the blissful look that adorned the faces of Yuri and Kushina many times. She never missed those days when they seemed to walk funny, a hitch in their step when walking through a room. Yura always wondered if that would be her one of these days. From the girth of her blonde lover, it sounded like those days weren't far for her, but it wasn't fair. Her instincts as a woman screamed for the delicate touch, and she wished for no other than him to grant it. Perhaps she should broach the question, but would it be right when he just got married to Kushina? But if he kept doing this to her, she had no idea if she could last. Unable to help herself, Yura touched her breasts, aware that her nipples were hard. Her lower half trembled with great need while one of her hands stroked Naruto's long, toned arms. In the morning haze, her lust excited itself and she wished to relieve it. "Ni-sama, you're not fair. Leaving me like this," Yura thought as she panted. Finding the strength that she didn't know she had, Yura somehow managed to pry her hands from herself. She then managed to worm her way out of Naruto's grasp. At this point, she needed a bath, a very cold bath. Thankfully, the bath was just what Yura needed. With a towel wrapped around her waist, she smiled as she watched Naruto sleep so moronically. For someone so powerful, who was made to keep the nations in check, he could fall asleep in such ridiculous ways. Yet, that made him so much more lovable as well. Yura stroked his face, her eyes gazing over his frame. What are you doing?" Surprised to hear him speak, Yura jerked her hand away. Sorry, did I wake you up?" she asked. Naruto rolled over and opened his eyes, gazing upon her form all wrapped up in a towel. "Keep looking like that and I'll never get any sleep." "What time is it?" he asked, satisfied with the blush on Yura's face. "I think everyone's asking that these days. We can look at Iwagakure's sundial. It was created long ago and distributed to the other nations. It's a good invention until we bring back proper technology. Of course, I think we must be careful lest we strip mine the entire world in our haste." Anyway, if you're asking for my guess, then I suppose it's either the middle of the day, give or take 1 or 2 hours, she suggested, realizing she almost started getting into work talk. Aware of what she was doing, Naruto smiled. "Yeah, those rock guys are ingenious. But, enough about them," the Kyuubi Jinchuriki said. He held out his hand and grasped Yura's soft fingers. She looked at him, clearly confused by his gesture until he kissed her hand. "Thanks for last night. That was the best sleep I ever had recently. I'm glad I have you, Yura-chan. If there's one thing Sasuke's gotten right about me, I'm stubborn. No matter how good I've been trained, I just ain't the planning type, but I gotta get it down quickly or I won't feel right." "Thanks for keeping me grounded," Naruto claimed, looking at her with those same blue eyes that made her chest beat. "I'll always be there to keep you grounded, Ni-sama. I think I've gotten used to how you do things," she replied. She then slipped away into another room and proceeded to get dressed. Meanwhile, Naruto leaned up and threw the covers off. "Oh yeah. Then, how about I throw the schedule out the door? How about you and me have the day to ourselves? Just you and me, no one else around. I've worked enough these few days. I owe you and Yuri-chan some time," Naruto remarked. Poking her head out, Yura smiled. "Why, Uzumaki-san, are you inviting me on a date?" she asked. Rather than answer, Naruto smiled. He threw on a shirt and some pants. "If I answer, will you say yes?" he then asked. Yura made a grand display of considering her lover's proposal. "I think I can pencil you in," she uttered, granting him a sweet smile as she returned to the side room to do her hair as best she could. It was kinda hard with no mirror. As for Naruto, he had to admit that he was still a little tired. Yet, relaxation was also found in the pleasant times of the day. He resolved himself to not think of anything aside from Uzumaki Yura. He then resolved to do the same for Yuri. In fact, he had a few things for Yuri of all people. After watching his face and brushing his teeth, Naruto stood at the door and noticed Yura walk over to them. As they had come here on official business, she hadn't exactly had the most alluring attire for a date. Nevertheless, a woman could most certainly make do. "How's my hair? Is it all right? We don't have mirrors like back at home," Yura claimed, making Naruto chuckle. "It's fine, Yura-chan. Now, let's go," Naruto said, pulling her close and guiding her out the door. Aware of the circumstances, Kurama and the others took breaks of their own, settling themselves into silence and allowing the summoner of the shinigami to enjoy himself. Naruto and Yura exited the building and quickly immersed themselves into Iwagakure society. Unfortunately, that was rather hard to do as both found their fame to be both a positive and negative. So many eyes were upon them wherever they went. Yura actually felt a little self-conscious, brushing her red hair every so often. At first glance, one wouldn't think she'd been one of the few to lead the vanguard into an onslaught against the greatest of Jashin's demonic abominations. However, right now, she was just a lover enjoying her moments with Naruto. Passing this way and that, Yura glanced at the numerous tradesmen and merchants who came, shipping and sending boxes to and fro. Horse-drawn carts, some single and others double, pulled mountains of crates carrying materials into the village. Iwa Shinobi worked overtime, checking flimsy passports, and inspecting cargo. However, amongst it all, Yura noticed how many people gave them such a wide berth. Some even lowered their heads, either afraid to look them in the eye or bowing out of respect. "This doesn't bother you?" Yura whispered. Naruto smiled. "I've had to get used to it, jumping around from place to place. The worst ones are those who bump into me and excessively apologize. One time, a guy tried to sell me his wife as an apology. I don't think she liked that very much," Naruto told, making Yura snort. "Please tell me you're joking," she asked. When the Uzumaki patriarch looked at her evenly, she shivered. His eyes told of no falsehoods and she couldn't tell if she should either be amazed at the story or disgusted by the actions told. "I wish. That was but one of the stranger encounters. You know I've got my own fan club now?" he asked. Yura's eyebrow furrowed. "Oh really? And just who is a part of this fan club? Anyone we should know about?" Yura asked. Naruto noted how her hand clenched his arm. It didn't hurt per se, but it made Naruto gently touch her. "Hey, you three are all I need. You know that. I don't know who's in that club, but I already know that none of them compare to you," he said smoothly. In fact, it was so smooth that Yura couldn't help but release her grip on him. She smiled and leaned her head on his shoulder. "Nice save, Ni-sama," she replied, falling into step with him as they continued through the village. If there was one thing Naruto and Yura were thankful for, it was that there clearly wasn't a lack of anything interesting during their walk. They regaled each other with tales and stories, more specifically of times when they had to be apart for long periods. Yura continued her training, specifically mastering more than a few ceiling formations, and even attempting to come up with her own after hours of study. Naruto spoke of the long meetings with the cage, but also the wondrous sights he'd seen of the planet. He even promised to take Yura to some of the spots he discovered when he'd been by himself. Yura decided to take him up on his word. She found herself interested in these locations he'd found. As their walk continued, Yura laughed as she saw her lover holding numerous gifts given to him by various merchants, politicians, and civilians. Sorry, this wasn't how I thought this was gonna go," Naruto claimed, hastily sealing all the presents he'd been given. "No worries. I won't turn down a free meal. Besides, I love apples," Yura claimed, taking a bite of one. It was certainly the freshest apple she ever remembered eating. Naruto sighed as he finished putting the gifts away. "Yeah, well, be sure to help yourself. I guess I was given an entire crate of the stuff," Naruto returned, grimacing when he and Yura saw more people headed their way. Unwilling to endure more, he picked up Yura, startling her. "Ni-sama," she exclaimed. Rather than answer, Naruto sped off, heading off somewhere else where they wouldn't be disturbed. The crowd groaned in displeasure as they watched him go. A few passers-by laughed, having already gotten the chance to give the Kyuubi Jinchuriki their gifts. Far off, Naruto set Yura down on top of a monstrously high hill. Nevertheless, Yura found herself blown away by the spectacular view. "Ni-sama, when you sweep me off my feet, can you give me some warning next time?" she asked, fixing her hair. It had gotten frazzled in the hopping and running. Naruto smirked. "How are you gonna like it if you see it coming?" he asked. Yura glared at him but she simply couldn't stay angry. Instead, she stared out over the horizon. Though construction had begun, the land of rock was still very much in its natural state, the hand of man not yet too involved in it. "Well, it seems like you've got the attention you always wanted," Yura remarked, finding something to fill in the silence. She shivered when she felt him wrap his arms around her. "I have all the attention I need right here. You know, when I was younger, I longed for all that attention. I just wanted to be seen and not ignored. But, now that I've got it, I find it's not all as great as I thought. Sure, it's nice, but it doesn't matter so much to me anymore. You and the others are all I need," Naruto said, kissing Yura's cheek. Yura inhaled sharply, a shivering rising from within her. Ni-sama, she groaned as she turned her head and kissed him deeply. Naruto held her as close as he could, savoring her lips as well. She touched his chest for a moment before they pulled away. Yura panted, her eyes fluttering. Amused with himself, Naruto grabbed a scroll. You know, this is actually a good time since we didn't have any breakfast. I guess those gifts are good for something, he said as he unsealed an assortment of foods for them both. Ni-sama, you shouldn't take advantage of people's kindness like that. Even if they're doing it with ulterior motives, Yura claimed, reaching for one of the fruits offered. She was still kind of hungry. Naruto laughed and leaned back. Oh, you noticed that? He asked, popping a fresh strawberry in his mouth. It was perfectly sweet and full of juice. That they were only giving you gifts in the hopes that you'd help them all out with something later. Ni-sama, I was a chunin back in Konoha. I know when someone's trying to get something from you. The only question is, are you gonna agree? She asked. Naruto shrugged. That's something I'll decide when I head back to Uzushio. I can't go helping everyone with random desires. It's a slippery slope I'm walking on, he answered. Yura paused, stopping herself from eating what was in her hand. She was sure she was being overly paranoid, but there was something in that response that she didn't like. Turning around, she faced him. Ni-sama, just promise me you won't lose your kind heart. More than any power, that's your greatest strength, Yura stressed. Naruto ceased eating as well. He quickly noticed Yura's face. Her gaze was intense and focused, making the blonde lean up. Yura, what's the matter? He asked. Promise me, she exclaimed, clenching her hands while Naruto continued to look at her confused. I promise, he said, more like he was asking a question. He didn't know what he was supposed to say, but he figured he'd just say what Yura might have wanted to hear. Even then, he answered honestly. He never felt like he was going to change that severely. Was he? Seemingly satisfied, Yura nodded, leaning back into her lover and enjoying the clean air of the mountains. They ate the food gifted to them with joy and serenity. Up there, no one was fit to bother them. Her hands in his, everything seemed so perfect at that moment. The wind blew up there, but its breeze wasn't as cold as they thought. It was like the breeze of an early spring morning. Yura-chan, you and Yuri have put up with me during my engagement to Ka-chan. But, I hadn't fully considered your feelings in the matter. Are you worried I won't marry you? He asked. Rather surprised by the question, Yura turned her head to her lover. She noticed his curious gaze, his eyes solely focused on her. The intensity of his gaze made her blush. Nevertheless, she thought on his question. I don't think it's bothered me as much as it has Yuri. No offense to her, but when you propose to her, don't expect a fancy thing like Kushina-san wanted. Yuri has already devoted herself to you, a wedding is just a formality, one that she doesn't care if anyone sees or not. I say that because I don't think she's willing to go without sex if it's for her sake. I think she was willing because it was what you and Kushina-san wanted. However, being you won't do it if she doesn't want to, and she's been holding out long enough. She's actually looking forward to whatever you have planned for her in Iowa, Yura claimed. Naruto chuckled momentarily. Yet, he remained focused on Yura. Truth be told, he had not expected to have other lovers aside from his mother. He certainly didn't think he was that worthy of a guy, but he was more than willing to make this work. At the very least, he never wanted anyone to think they made a mistake. While he had hot, sweaty fun with Yuri and his mother, he remembered that Yura might not be so immune to the actions he demonstrated. And you? He asked. Yura sighed. I honestly don't know. I never wanted a rushed marriage. I always knew you'd marry me at some point, but I'm not so sure I could do with the whole wait for months. I know I've done it this long, but it's been very hard, especially given Yuri's escapades. Sometimes, I wonder what I'm holding out for, but it's what my mother always wanted. What's even worse is that you never pushed anything from me. You were always respectful and loving. Does me not partaking in all the marriage traditions like Kushina-san make me less than her? Yura asked. Rather than answer, Naruto pulled her closer. You are not Ka-chan, Yura-chan. You're not Yuri either. If you wished the same, I would do no less for you than I did for Ka-chan. As for Yuri, she's more like me than I care to admit. Because of that, I'm sure she'd understand. However, it wouldn't be for months. My wedding to Ka-chan just kept getting delayed. Then there was that whole end of the world thing. Had things progressed normally, it would have been for a month or two, not nearly a year, the blonde explained. Yura hummed, suddenly finding the reasoning in that. I suppose that's true, she remarked. Naruto still pulled her further and grinned. I've got something planned for you. Don't worry. Just let the anticipation boil. I've been dying to partake of you too, never giving you a moment's rest, Naruto teased, kissing her cheek and then her neck. Yura shivered. Ni-sama, she groaned, shivering as he continued to place small kisses along her neck. His hands rubbed up and down her waists. She hummed in delight, unconsciously turning her head to the side, granting him more of her neck. His hands felt so good. Against the cold air, his hot touch was coiling around her. She panted, sighing for a simple touch of more. Her thoughts drifted to her wedding night, where she gave herself fully to her husband. Her imagination ran wild and her body responded. She clenched her fists when Naruto's hand just barely rubbed over her breasts. She still remembered their intimate encounter back in Kumo. She wanted so much more of those, but she wasn't sure she'd be strong enough to decline anything further. Luckily, Naruto knew that. However, that didn't stop him from turning her head to him. Her eyes fluttered when he kissed her. His lips were hot, all for the sake of making her legs weak. His embrace was no different than when they went to sleep. Every smack made her resolve weaken. But his lips felt so good. After a moment, the two parted. Yura panted breathlessly. Her fingers touched Naruto's chest. It was so muscular. She exhaled slowly. You're not making this easy for me, she mentioned. Naruto laughed momentarily. Rather than his lips, he decided to feed her a piece of fruit. Better? He asked. No, it wasn't better. Yura really wanted to be kissed again. In fact, she wanted a lot more than kissing. This was all Naruto's fault. It was also Yuri's fault kinda, but mostly Naruto's. It'll do, she remarked, swallowing when she felt his arousal against her bottom. It was certainly impressive. Somehow, Yura managed to control herself and enjoy the rest of their time together. She sighed as the cool mountain air rushed over her hair. As the hours passed by, she and Naruto traded stories with each other. For them, there seemed to be nothing that could bore them. The sense of intimacy carried itself around them with the wind. After so long, the two Uzumaki returned to their building. As soon as they entered, they noticed Yuri tapping her foot on the ground at the entrance. What am I, chopped liver? Where the hell have you two be? Yuri's tirade and question stilled momentarily when she noticed the content look on her sister's face. It also didn't help that Yura immediately looked guilty. Yuri narrowed her eyes. Yura, you've got that. I totally had sex and feel guilty about it, look, the Sanbi Jinchuriki claimed. Yura stammered. Yuri, don't be ridiculous. Ni-sama and I were just enjoying some private time. Besides, where are Yukimaru-kun and Hanabi-san? She asked, quickly hoping to deflect the conversation. She clenched her lover's arm when she saw the dead glare her sister was giving her. They're having some private time to themselves. I've spent much of the day supervising them in their training. And Naruto I want my sealing jutsu ascension exam as soon as we get home. You know I'm ready, Yuri replied, folding her arms. Her indignation only rose when she saw the smile on Naruto's face. She wasn't aware she'd said something funny. Unknown to her, Naruto was rather laughing at just how similar Yuri seemed compared to him. He was sure he acted like that on more than one occasion. After a moment, he nodded. Yeah, you are. It'll be the first thing I do when we get back. Promise, Yuri-chan, he said, providing a thumbs up for emphasis. Yuri grumbled and nodded. She then pulled Naruto inside and pushed him toward the stairs. Good, now you go upstairs, Naruto. I gotta talk to my sister. Yuri claimed. Naruto smiled, grabbing the wooden railing. And why can't I listen? He asked. 'Cause you're a guy. Now go work or something for a little bit. No guys allowed in girl talk. Yuri exclaimed. Naruto hummed, letting his thoughts reach his summons. Is that a thing? He inquired. Yes, Pakura and Suiren claimed at the same time. It was done so quickly that the guys looked at them curiously. It is? Gari inquired. Dan laughed while Yahiko shook his head. As for Kimimaro, he remained solemn in another part of the shared space. Dealing with you guys, I'd say it's needed, Suiren returned, grinning at the bewildered expressions from the guys. Dan cleared his throat and coughed. Then, Suiran-san, why do some women seem apprehensive when their men have guy talk? He inquired. Yahiko's mouth thinned. Dan-san, I believe you should tread carefully, Yahiko retorted. All of you, shut up. Kurama and Morio bellowed while Naruto climbed up the stairs. He watched Yuri pull her sister into a separate room and close the door. Finding himself alone, he shrugged and sat on his bed. Putting himself in a meditative posture, he appeared in his mind. At this point, it was better to train with the others than simply do nothing. Well, to be more precise, it was better to train with one person. Appearing in his mindscape, he quickly greeted the others until his gaze landed on Pakura. Her eyes remained even while he inspected her. The others watched the interaction cautiously before the blonde slowly shook his head as if settling a matter on his own. Come on. You and me. We're gonna get this right at some point. It might as well be now, especially given the threat from before, he claimed. Pakura nodded and floated to him. Understood, Shikyo-sama, the former Suna Kunoichi uttered. She then closed her eyes and merged her spirit with Naruto's. Immediately, the two noticed Kurama and Morio join in as they stood before the others. Remember, brat, I won't allow any of them to go easy on you. Kurama said. Really, the fox didn't feel like training. He would much rather nap and waste the day away, but even Kurama knew this was a good time to train. If Naruto and Kagura could willingly merge, training would be much easier. However, the Otsutsuki princess of the main branch made it clear that she only wished to be called upon when necessary. More often than not, she remained alone, allowing her own thoughts to consume her with hardly any interaction with anyone else. Of course, Naruto tried to get her to cooperate, but it became clear that attempting to fully force anything with her wasn't in anyone's best interest. So, Naruto left her alone unless necessary, as did everyone else. Of course, none of them trusted her. She was rather forthcoming about her plans, feeling them not even worthy of having it hidden from them. For many of them, that was irksome, but there wasn't much they could do about it. An existence like her was beyond them, for now. Time passed quickly for Naruto as he, and Pakura, were beaten up fairly severely, training with Kurama and the rest of his summons for the next 6 hours. After so much time, he was finally free to end the training and gaze upon his surroundings. Of the many things he expected, Yuri sleeping by the side of his bed wasn't one of them. Turning his head, the blonde grimaced. Looks like I trained for longer than I thought, he said to himself. The sun was close to setting over the horizon. When he moved, he winced a little. Sitting so long in one place brought pain to his legs. He stumbled across the room for a moment or two until he made it to a washing basin. Damn, he really hoped plumbing would come back soon. Having no sink was a nightmare. Either way, he washed his face and sighed. With the water cooling him off, he held up a hand. He quickly summoned the golden flames for a moment. His eyes lingered on them until the flames slowly turned a violet color. The violet flames danced under his gaze before he snuffed them as well. Inhaling slowly, and exhaling just as slowly, he pushed away from the basin. Entering the room again, he saw Yuri still sleeping there. Smiling, he hoped to pick her up and put her in the bed, but he didn't get very far in his endeavor. All he managed to was to touch her shoulder before she smiled. Finally awake, she said much to his surprise. Sorry, did I wake you up? He asked. Yuri leaned up and rolled her neck. Not really. I was training with Isobu-chan. He's a grumpy old man, but push him enough and he'll do anything. I figured I should take after you, especially since Shizune-san and Ebisu-san reside in there too. Naruto nodded while Yuri stood up and stretched. She pushed in her back, pushing out her chest. She smirked when she saw her blonde lover gazing at her breasts, but she made no attempts to dissuade his looks. Instead, she just continued for a little longer before she twisted her arms. Tsunade's arrived in the village, Yuri said. Naruto's eyes narrowed briefly before he nodded. He was actually thankful for that little nugget of information. What about Gaara and Mei? He asked. Yuri shrugged. I was told that they should be arriving late tomorrow. Hope you enjoy one more day of freedom. It won't be long until I'll be lucky to see you at all, Yuri said. Being him, Naruto noticed Yuri's melancholy tone. He smiled as he took her in his arms. She touched his arms and looked at him. Hey, I'm sorry we haven't spent as much time together as you wanted. But guess what, you're gonna have me all day tomorrow. Besides, I'm bad at taking breaks. Whatever you want to do tomorrow, we'll do it. However, he paused, whispering into her ear. Quote, I think you'll like what I have planned for you. You've been patient and I think I can reward you, he teased, nibbling on her ear. Yuri squirmed in his grasp. She hated that she believed him so easily. He'd toyed with her before, ever since that time they were in that frozen domain. She swallowed nervously. And Naruto ni, cut it out. Don't think you can keep doing this to me. Yuri groaned, touching his long arms. He chuckled until he turned her head to him. He kissed her deeply, his tongue stroking hers with fervor. Yuri moaned into his mouth, feeling his hands roam her delicate curves. Yuri knew she wasn't the most curvaceous young woman out there, but she felt so happy to feel so desired by her lover. His touch was pure electricity. We'll have so much fun tomorrow, Yuri-chan, Naruto claimed. She couldn't help but believe him. It was only made more cruel when he released her. He always did that. One of these days, I'm gonna nail you in your damn nuts, Naruto ni. This better be worth it, Yuri said with a snarl. Despite the threat, Naruto kept smiling. He agreed and spent the last few hours coordinating an agenda for the Cage Summit. He didn't work for too long, 2 or 3 hours at the most. After that, he spent the rest of his time with Yuri. They had a rather fulfilling dinner and settled for playing a few games of wooden chess. Of course, neither of them enjoyed it that much, not being as inclined to it as say Shikamaru, but it staved off the boredom enough for them to go to bed. Finally, Yuri couldn't keep the smile off her face as she held her lover. He felt as warm as she remembered and she soaked in the feeling for all it was worth. She had to get as much as she could because the day after tomorrow would no doubt be very busy. You're enjoying this too much, Naruto mentioned, feeling Yuri wiggle in his grasp. Shut up. Let me enjoy this, the Sanbi Jinchuriki replied, pulling his arms around her. She wanted to stay like this forever if they were able. Try not to kick me out of the bed this time, Naruto claimed. Yuri's eyes shot open for a moment as she turned her head. Her red hair flew up into Naruto's face. It was one time, Naruto ni. Just hold me tighter then. She fired back, giving him a wide grin that showed her teeth. In response, Naruto swiftly smacked her ass. Yuri jumped momentarily. When she settled, he grinned. Keep that up and I'll do it again, he threatened. Yuri turned to him. I bet you won't. You're too much of a goody too, in. Yuri clenched her hands when Naruto slapped her ass 2 more times. Her butt stung but in a very good way. She turned her head and Naruto noticed her lick her lips. Her eyes honed in on him like a piece of meat just waiting to be devoured. Naruto ni, I'm very pent up at the moment. You're not gonna be able to make your plan if you keep doing that, Yuri claimed. The Kyuubi Jinchuriki's eyes narrowed, especially under the weight of Uzumaki Yuri's challenging smirk. His eyes narrowed, yet he followed with a challenging smirk of his own. Oh, he was going to make sure to enjoy this. The blonde closed his eyes and fell asleep with Yuri right behind him. The lands of Iwagakure fell into a peaceful lull. While Naruto slept in the faraway lands of Iwagakure, Sasuke was awake with his team in Konoha, looking over more documents. Books, maps, and texts were scattered across the room as Tayuya scowled. She slammed a book down. Fuck, where is this guy? These notes haven't given us shit, she exclaimed. Konan put down a book and cleared her throat. While I don't share Tayuya-san's crass demeanor, I believe she has a point. I surmise that any of the tunnels leading to Shimura Danzo's hideouts were destroyed when the earth was remade. Perhaps we should change our approach, Konan advised. Before Sasuke could speak, he noticed Neji come through the door. I managed to gather some of the Hyuga and we searched the inner workings of the village for at least 150 miles. Unfortunately, there's nothing out there. What's worse is that we can't be sure if the shinobi loyal to Danzo all died in the battle with Jashin, or if they were among the number who turned into corrupted humans. I hate to mention it, but we might have to rely on our senses if we are to locate him, Neji uttered. Sasuke frowned for a moment and leaned back in his chair. The Uchiha tapped his finger on the table while everyone awaited his decision. They'd been here for a few days now and they hadn't had much success. Besides, it'd be insanity of Danzo to try and hide in Konoha itself. Sasuke sucked his teeth, but was all they could do just run around the world praying for a sign. Itachi didn't discover anything in Danzo's office either. He claimed that all the evidence had been burned away months in advance. It was burning even before Naruto teleported the village away, Sasuke reported, releasing a sigh of frustration. After a moment of thinking, he stood up. It looks like we're done here then. We'll come up with a plan in the morning, the Uchiha heir claimed. The others agreed before they noticed Tayuya staring at the ceiling. Something wrong, Tayuya-san? Neji asked. Fortunately for Neji, he quickly noticed the problem as did Neji. Konan was the only one left out of the loop for a moment until her senses flared as the temperature in the room lowered a tremendous amount. It became so cold that everyone saw their own breath. Yet, though the presence was heavy, it wasn't unpleasant. They knew what it was. It was the shuddering, humbling encroachment of death. And it stood behind Sasuke. The Uchiha slowly turned around and everyone noticed the kindred step out of the shadow of darkness amongst the bookcases. Lamb and Wolf stared at them all, but it was clear to everyone that their gaze was primarily focused on Sasuke. Uchiha Sasuke, Shikyo-sama has ordered us to aid you in your endeavor, Lamb said, her voice reverberating over the area. Sasuke frowned for a moment. Being this close, he had to admit that the presence of the kindred was otherworldly. Though Wolf remained silent, his imposing form was enough to set the hairs on the back of his neck on edge. Why? I didn't ask for his help, Sasuke said. Perhaps he shouldn't have made that sound as ungrateful as he did, but Sasuke wasn't about to be babied by anyone, least of all Naruto. He'd sooner not go on any mission than to feel like he was being spoon-fed victories. Wolf growled. Watch your tone, whelp. We're not gonna aid you in everything. By warning from a powerful being, it was stated that your life was in danger, Uchiha Sasuke. We're here to observe and act if necessary. We shall reside within you briefly until we can confirm this threat, Wolf said, his gruff voice causing them all to shiver. None shivered more so than Itachi. Sasuke was in danger. Did that mean that they were close? That could have meant a lot of things actually. Sasuke's eyes narrowed. On the table, one of his fists clenched. Immediately, he thought of Yuna and his mother. Explain, he said. There is no explanation, boy. It's just as I stated. We know about as much information as you do. Just keep doing what you're doing and we'll take care of the rest, Wolf growled. He and Lamb quickly faded away like a mist and flew into Sasuke's body. The Uchiha was quickly worried, wondering if his body would be torn apart. Naruto made it clear that mortal couldn't handle whatever power he used. As far as Sasuke was aware, he hadn't been resurrected by Naruto. Fear not, Uchiha Sasuke. You have stayed close to Shikyo-sama for long enough. Our merger is not permanent. It will be long before you feel any after effects. We shall reside here until the proper time, Lamb said before they fell silent. The cold sensation in the room slowly dispelled as everyone looked at the empty records room. Well, what the fuck are we supposed to do with that? Tayuya asked, throwing her hands up. So apparently, the Uchiha Tard was in danger, but no one, not even the dumbass, Summons, knew from what. It sounds like Naruto-san met some unfortunate enemies. They claimed that he was warned by some powerful beings. Is there any chance it could be the same person who attacked Sasuke-san before? Perhaps they want to finish the battle from before. Konan theorized. Unfortunately, all in the room but Sasuke had been in other places when the battle went on. All they had was hearsay. Of course, it was easy to believe that hearsay when it was given other witnesses such as Kakashi, Rin, Yugao, and Naruto. Plus, it wasn't like Sasuke to bloat up an opponent when he could deal with them. You don't seem to think that's the case, Sasuke, Itachi said, drawing the gaze of everyone. The younger Uchiha frowned as he looked at the table. It seemed that Itachi still could read him. If he focused properly, he could feel the sensation of the kindred taking residence within him. No doubt they hoped to keep their presence as small as possible. He didn't know what they were looking for, but as it was he'd have to keep his guard up. Should we abandon the assignment? Neji inquired. Sasuke's frown deepened. No, the Uchiha said, standing to his feet. Was he really supposed to tuck his tail in and hide when things became a little scary? How could he face Yuna and his mother, or be the head of his clan if he feared an enemy? He might not be a shinobi of Konoha anymore, but he was still practiced in the arts. If he were afraid of losing his life, then he might as well not even be a shinobi, and likely lose his life anyway. He'd been afraid when he faced Jashin, yet he embraced his death all the same. Besides, his best friend was the Dobi. He'd work things out somehow. We'll continue the mission until we've properly assessed the threat. Just keep your eyes open. For now, we'll end our search here. I don't believe we'll garner anything else from these records. Head back to the apartment and we'll leave in the morning, Sasuke said. The others didn't really agree with this course of action, but they didn't mention it. Instead, they pushed up from their seats and filed out the door. All except Itachi. The older Uchiha looks at the younger. What are you thinking, Sasuke? Talk to me, Itachi said. Sasuke almost wanted to snort at that. After all the times Itachi blew him off when they were younger, now he wanted to talk and share concerns. Yet, the younger Uchiha sighed, ridding himself of the thought. I've been in danger countless times. What makes now any different? He asked. In response, Itachi patted his little brother's shoulder. You're stronger, and you're not alone. Whatever this threat is, we'll meet it together, Sasuke, Itachi said. Sasuke slowly nodded while his brother headed for the door. And, if you survive, I'll be sure to glow up your achievements to Yuna and Ka-chan. They do adore you after all, Itachi said. Of the many things Itachi could say he never saw, a flustered Sasuke was among them. Now, he could cross that off his list. Being perceptive, Itachi had an idea of the happenings between Sasuke and the two female Uchiha, namely their mother. Itachi wouldn't say he understood because he certainly didn't. It was just like he didn't understand nor approve of Naruto's relationship with Kushina. It just wasn't in him, but he did love his family. If this was a route Sasuke wanted to go down, then Itachi was more than willing to respect their choices. I'm not, Sasuke clamored before he noticed Itachi's disbelieving gaze. If you must live as you desire, be sure that you leave no regrets. That is all I have to say, Itachi said as he closed the door. Sasuke watched his brother go while he sat down again. How did this turn from his life being in danger to his love life? Sasuke snorted. Why were matters like this so annoying? Yup, Naruto definitely neglected Yuri for too long. When he woke up, he expected a lot of things that she'd ask from him. However, training deep in the mountains wasn't one of them, especially not with their Biju. Yuri was currently wielding 2 of the 3 tails of the Sanbi. In addition, was trying to combine it with the form she'd used before, merging Shizune and Ebisu with her. While battling Jashin, she'd been able to do it albeit temporarily. With new threats coming upon them, she wished to be ready. Naruto ruthlessly clashed with her, sometimes finding himself in awe of Yuri's aggression. Sometimes, he wondered if other genin were fortunate that Yuri's career had come to a grinding halt as Konoha Kunoichi. If she fought like this with many others, she would have outclassed them entirely. She even got a few good hits in on Naruto. Sometimes, he wondered if they were training or if Yuri was letting out some frustrations. Dashing forward, Yuri blasted several small-scale Biju bombs. Each one crashed into mountains and rocks, sending stones crashing through the ground. Meanwhile, Naruto stayed moving, running this way and that. He jumped to one of the falling boulders and propelled himself off it. Grinning, he watched Yuri swinging by her tail on another stone. She launched herself at him, summoning a myriad of clones. Naruto quickly summoned his own clones and launched them at her. Both sets of clones crashed into each other over and over, clouds of smoke erupting over the private area. Naruto landed on the ground, frowning as the smoke obscured his vision. Nevertheless, he got a bead on Yuri's unique chakra. He stepped back, narrowly dodging a blow from overhead. The ground cratered from Yuri's blow while she growled at her lover. Hold still, she hissed. Naruto slid across the ground, his own chakra cloak weaving in uncertain directions. Make me, Yuri-chan. Naruto taunted. Unfortunately, Yuri took the bait and dashed toward him. Her fist cocked back, she fired it forward. Her speed was impressive, easily more than enough to make Jonin nervous. Yet, she gasped when her fist met Naruto's palm. He then grabbed her arm and flung her over his shoulder. You'll have to do better than that, Naruto ni. Yuri thought as she quickly arched her back and landed on her feet nearly upside down. She tried to quickly right herself, yet she gasped when Naruto sucked in his feet and flew them back into the face of a great mountain. It shattered briefly and Yuri found herself pinned with her arm behind her back. Yuri struggled as quickly as she could, but her lover's grip was strong. She actually wondered if he was going to break her arm. What was worse was that he was slowly grinding his pelvis against her. She glared at him, especially with the flush on her face. See, cut that out. You know I can't focus when you do that. She quivered while Naruto smirked. He leaned his head forward and bit her ear. Surrender, and I'll stop, he whispered deeply, making Yuri clench her eyes closed. She'd try to counter, but her other hand was shoved against the wall. Additionally, her blood was boiling, begging to be cooled in just the right way. Fuck you, Yuri retorted breathlessly. Naruto's grin widened. Sounds like something you'd do, he answered before he finally released her. Yuri nearly slumped to her shoulders before she sucked in her legs and launched her back into Naruto's chest. The blonde coughed as they fell onto the ground, panting as their chakra cloaks slowly receded. How long does that make it? Yuri inquired. 4 hours maybe. I lost count, Naruto breathed out. Yuri groaned as she rolled off her lover. She was definitely going to feel all of this tomorrow. In hindsight, maybe it wouldn't be a good idea to do such intensive exercise when she'd be moving around a lot tomorrow. The two Uzumaki sat there for a little while, hoping to catch their breaths. After a few minutes, they leaned up and Yuri fanned herself, whipping the neck of her shirt back and forth. Unknown to her, Naruto watched, his eyes drinking in the sight of her sweat glistening in the morning sun. He clenched his fists, his eyes following the beads of sweat down her delicate curves. It became clear to him that she was growing again. Her breasts were filling out again and muscles from intense training decorated her stomach. Her hands brushed through her long red hair. His hands trembled. Maybe it was the rush of adrenaline and his heart beating in his chest, or maybe so many close contacts left him charged up, but he really wanted her right now. He wanted that beautiful redhead in front of him, and his mind was working at the moment. Bad things usually happened when Uzumaki Naruto's mind started working. Wanna head back into the village, Yuri-chan? We can get something to eat, he said. Yuri sighed and nodded. Yeah, that sounds good, Naruto-ni. I could really use some water right now, the younger sister of the Uzumaki sister claimed. It seemed she still had more training to undertake if she was going to complement both forms. She just never expected that it'd take so many months. Either way, she helped Naruto to his feet as they entered the village. All the while, Yuri could feel her lover's insistent, hungry gaze over her body. She smiled when she noticed his gaze lingering on her ass specifically. It seemed funny because she wasn't even trying to seduce him this time. Of course, she appreciated his gaze. He was the only one she wanted to look at her this way. Unfortunately, she suspected that nothing would come of the act. Still, he'd been teasing her as of late. Perhaps a girl could dream. Then again, they definitely say dreams do come true. None came truer than when Yuri felt Naruto grab her and pull her to him. Yuri-chan, there was always a fantasy you had, wasn't there? Wanna try it now? Naruto whispered into her ear. Lemon. Yuri barely had the time to see that all the people around her were stopped in perfect suspended animation. Her eyes widened before Naruto turned her head to his and his lips came over hers. A wave of hot passion and sweat filled her mouth with such eagerness that she nearly felt herself floating amongst the clouds. Lemon end. Was it worth the wait? He asked. Yuri grinned. No, it wasn't. But, that was amazing. I can't feel my legs, Yuri muttered. Unknown to the Sanbi Jinchuriki, her lover's eyes gleamed. Sounds like I'm not done then. Uzumaki Yuri shuddered. Huh? She asked before she found herself lifted in the air in Naruto's arms, all their clothes with them. The blonde grinned when he looked at her. He quickly vanished in a blur of speed, heading back to their apartment. Oh, he was going to make Yuri rescind that verdict before the day was over, or he'd die trying. Oh wait, he couldn't really die, could he? Funny how that worked out. The next day came soon enough. Naruto stepped out of bed and put on his clothes. He glanced to the side and saw Yuri sleeping peacefully. Their room smelled of sweat and sex. The Sanbi Jinchuriki slept with a wide smile on her face. Oh, it was definitely worth the wait now. Sleep well, Yuri-chan. I'll see you later, Naruto whispered. He kissed her cheek and she shifted momentarily before settling. Even unconsciously, her body was still trembling with the fleeting embers of lust and passion. He quickly opened the window and then left out the door. Having left his room, he noticed Yukimaru and Hanabi waiting for him. Should we not wait for Yura-san? Hanabi inquired. Naruto shook his head. Yura-chan has her own matters to attend to. She'll most likely be in the second round of meetings. Today is all about you two. I hope you enjoyed your time off because you're gonna wish you could go back to it once we're in there, the blonde said. Hanabi grimaced. She'd been in a lot of meetings as the Hyuga heiress. Surely, it couldn't be that bad. Naruto ni, are you sure you aren't just trying to scare us? Yukimaru asked. Naruto sighed. Yeah, he remembered he was that naive. How he wished he could go back to those times. Oh well, you'll see for yourselves. Now let's go, Naruto claimed. The sun had barely begun to shine over the horizon. He'd been alerted by his summons that the Kazekage and Mizukage arrived in Iwagakure. Surprisingly, it was decided that the meeting would happen immediately. Either Mei and Gaara had slept before making it into the village, or they were just trying to huff it through the day. Well, Naruto would have liked some more rest, but perhaps that was his own fault. Though, he was most definitely feeling energized. He ordered them forward and they followed after him. Being so early, there were hardly any civilians around. There were more than a few Iwa shinobi patrolling the grounds, but that wasn't an uncommon sight. Many of them acknowledged Naruto with a bow of their heads as he headed for the Iwagakure mansion, or what constituted the mansion at this point. The guards at the door lowered their heads and pushed open the doors for Naruto. Hanabi and Yukimaru found themselves a little out of sorts, especially Hanabi. She still remembered what many called Naruto when she was growing up. Many said he'd never amount to anything. Now, elite shinobi were lowering their heads to him, parting doors so that he might enter. It was most certainly an experience Hanabi wasn't used to confronting. The three walked up a few flights of stairs and found themselves in front of the meeting room. Alright, remember what we discussed? Naruto asked, his tone serious. Yukimaru and Hanabi nodded. We're there to observe, learn, and take notes. We got it, Naruto ni, Yukimaru claimed. The blonde nodded and turned to Hanabi. She nodded as well. Seeing this, he turned around and pushed open the door. Yukimaru and Hanabi shivered when they saw the 5 Kage seated around a large conference table. Each of them was flanked by 2 elite shinobi. That said, Tsunade's guards were clearly more impressive. The Toad Sage, Jiraiya, was at her back, smirking with Hatake Kakashi at his side. Naruto and Kakashi glanced at each other momentarily. Though happy to see each other, they shared no more than a glance to remain neutral. There might be time for talking later. Acting quickly according to what they learned, Yukimaru and Hanabi took their seats next to the podium where Naruto stood. He cleared his throat and spoke. Please remove your Kage hats, Naruto ordered. By his word, each of the Kage removed their hats and placed them on the table. The blonde saw this and summoned his shinigami cloak. Many marveled upon as it touched the ground, his eyes brimming with great power and majesty. The Kage and their guards briefly gasped at the sight. Even after seeing it so many times they never got used to it. Naruto seemed to glow with such radiance that it was hard to even stare at him for too long lest they go blind. As with the cycle of dates, the 5 Kage have been called together for another meeting. I am Uzumaki Naruto, your mediator and moderator. The time is 5:10 a.m. The 5 Kage Summit Conference has been called into order. Chapter 94. Quote, children have a lesson adults should learn, to not be ashamed of failing, but to get up and try again. Most of us adults are so afraid, so cautious, so safe, and therefore so shrinking and rigid and afraid that it is why so many humans fail. Most middle-aged adults have resigned themselves to failure. Malcolm X. Yukimaru cleared his throat as he watched Naruto usher in the beginning of the 5 Kage Summit. The young genin never thought he'd be here, sitting amongst the world's leaders and listening to talks and decisions whose structure could change the fate of the world at large. It was a little nerve-wracking if he were being honest. He knew that he just had to take notes and become acclimated to the political environment, yet still he felt his breath hitch in his throat, especially when he looked at his clan's patriarch. Taking a moment, the adopted son of Gurren turned to his fiancée. Hanabi seemed to be handling the pressure a little better than he was. Her eyes remained focused on the whole group. Naruto hadn't begun speaking yet, but she seemed ready to take any note that she could. Based on the stories she told him of when she was growing up, Yukimaru knew that she'd been in environments like this before. As her future husband, he couldn't afford to appear lacking. He took a deep breath and then turned to the rest of the group. When he turned, he stilled and noticed Naruto glance at him. The blonde was still under the full might of the shinigami, his whitish-silver cloak gently waving in a breeze created by his own power. The blonde then offered Yukimaru a small smile. The youngest member of the Uzumaki clan returned the smile, ready to begin working while Naruto turned to the rest of the Kage. Immediately, Kuretsuchi leaned back in her seat. Her finger tapped the table impatiently. Look, as much as I'd like to start all the introductions, I really want to know what you've got to say, Naruto. The Raikage and I have been thinking about this pressing news you've got for us. Care to explain that one right now? Kuretsuchi inquired. The Tsuchikage had to suppress a shiver when the summoner of the Shinigami turned his gaze toward her. After a moment, his power relaxed. His silver hair turned back to its usual yellow color. His silver eyes turned blue once again. After a moment, his lips thinned. You sure you want to rip the band-aid off right now? I thought no one eats the main course first, he replied. Kuretsuchi snorted. It's nearly 5:30 in the morning. I haven't eaten yet and I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. I'm going to get a headache one way or the other, and I'd really rather not leave the meeting on a note that makes me want to smash this table. Nevertheless, I guess I'll submit to the wishes of the other cage, Kuretsuchi claimed, glancing at the others. I shouldn't have to voice my opinion, but I agree with the Tsuchikage. I would like this mysterious matter announced now, the Raikage replied. Naruto noticed Tsunade sigh out of the corner of his eye. I'm not thrilled to be given such heavy news so early, but the Cage Summit was created for matters such as this. Nothing good comes from taking more time to be made aware of an issue, especially if it sounds as severe as what Tsuchikage Dono and Raikage Dono are claiming. I agree to listen to the matter. Mei nodded. I have gotten enough sleep. I would like to listen as well, Naruto-san, the Mizukage answered. Finally, Gaara nodded. I agree with the others, the Cage uttered. Then, all the cage turned their attention to the Kyuubi Jinchuriki. Immediately, Naruto realized he was a little more tired than he thought. He scratched the back of his head for a moment, gauging the reactions of each of the cage. The blonde exhaled slowly. Fine, then, I'll make the point quick. I was met by two Otsutsuki on my way here a few days ago. One of them was able to subdue one of my summons, Naruto answered. The cage didn't speak. They didn't even seem to express shock. After so many meetings, they'd definitely thought that the possibility wasn't unlikely. That said, it was a little unsettling to have some idea of how powerful Naruto's summons were. For even them to get subdued painted a rather grim outcome. Fucking wonderful, Kuretsuchi muttered to herself. Unfortunately, it wasn't so soft that the others couldn't hear her. While they wouldn't have put it so crass-like, they each agreed with her sentiments. They held the summon hostage. If they could subdue it, then it's likely that they had the means to do worse to it. Is that why you didn't engage? Gaara inquired. Naruto exhaled slowly. His eyes narrowed for but a moment as he remembered the incident. So far, all the notes he'd made back in the house he'd been staying in with Yura and Yuri weren't doing much help. Sure, they helped organize his thoughts, yet they didn't seem to help in lessening the severity of the story. Not exactly. There were two towns fairly close by. Additionally, Kagura warned me of just how powerful they were. From the way she made it sound, it doesn't seem like I would have been able to teleport them away without consequences. Plus, it seemed like they knew that as well. They captured my summon because they wanted to speak with me, Naruto explained. The others glanced at each other. I thought Otsutsuki don't converse with inferior creatures. Mei Terumi uttered. There was a bit of a chuckle from Ai's voice. Nevertheless, he cleared his throat when the others noticed Naruto's stern expression. Kagura told me there was something unusual about these two Otsutsuki. Both of them are even more powerful than her. Suffice to say, I felt a little compelled to listen to their request. Apparently, they wanted me to switch gods, I guess. They worship some being called the Great Will. Kagura explained it to be the supreme deity of all Otsutsuki, the only one to ever reach godhood. I don't know a whole lot of truth to her words, but if this guy's as powerful as she says then he's above even the Shinigami, Naruto answered. The cage widened their eyes. Even their guards felt a shudder roll through their bodies. Tsunade pinched the bridge of her nose while the Raikage clenched his fist. The frown on Gaara's face deepened as the Mizukage hid her expressions in her hands. The Tsuchikage bit her thumb's nail with a harsh scowl on her face. Nevertheless, Naruto continued on. They called me a lower heir. I've bounced this idea off Kurama, Kagura, and the others for some time. Kurama and Morio believe that lower heir is a connection to the Shinigami. Perhaps a lower god when compared to Kami or the Great Will, Naruto uttered. Gaara held up a hand. A moment, please. So these Otsutsuki seem to be extremely powerful, more powerful than even the average Otsutsuki. They also obeyed the local Otsutsuki deity, the Great Will. And this Great Will seems to have its sights set upon recruiting Naruto-san to its cause. What does it need you for? Gaara asked. Naruto breathed slowly through his mouth, almost as if he were trying to make noise that might help him think. I wish I could tell you, Gaara, but I don't know. Those two Otsutsuki weren't exactly willing to go into details. They didn't look like they were happy with speaking to me either. What I do know is that they said it was best that I join them. They believed we're not going to survive the coming invasion of the Otsutsuki. Apparently, it's already started. Those were not the words that the cage wanted to hear. Each of them provided varying degrees of shock. However, upon each of them was a lot of worry. What? So then the Kama has already been implanted into someone? I inquired. Naruto scratched his head. No, or if they have then it hasn't been recent. I'm not sure how long it might have begun. We've all been very busy, so it's likely that something happened somewhere when we weren't looking. However, Kagura, Kurama, and I think it has to have started because those two Otsutsuki gave me some information. They claimed that Sasuke was going to die at some point in the future, the blonde claimed. Of them all, Naruto, predictably, noticed Tsunade, Kakashi, and Jiraiya appeared to be the most affected. While the other cage didn't seem that invested, it didn't take them long to understand the magnitude of what Naruto was trying to claim. During the battle for the entire world, the cage had been given more than their fair view of what Uchiha Sasuke was capable of. It was easy to say that he was one of the most powerful shinobi in the world. Many were even aware that he established his power just below Kushina, Yuri, and Ura. He was by no means weak. Yet, even if Naruto could revive him, the odds that something could best the Uchiha to the point of killing him were chilling. Where is Uchiha Sasuke now? Tsunade asked. Naruto's eyes narrowed. I have him on an assignment to track down Shimura Danzo. After Sasuke, Kakashi, and Yugao were attacked by that unknown assailant. Kagura claims they're still on the moon, which still has Kagaya sealed. Unfortunately, I can't go there without being merged with the Shinigami. You know, I asked him if I could investigate things here, but he told me I should settle affairs here before looking into matters beyond our world. I assumed that to mean that despite the peace there would still be trouble while we've begun rebuilding, and I have to say that one of the biggest problems we've had was Danzo. I don't deny his loyalty to Konoha, but it's one that's clearly passed into obsession and fanaticism. If anyone could somehow screw all this up, it'd be him, Naruto explained. The others nodded slowly. As much as Tsunade didn't like such a blatant truth, she knew she was forced to confront it. Danzo had been a pain even when her sensei, Hiruzen, had been Hokage. She'd never gotten rid of him because she couldn't find the evidence of any wrongdoing. Well, at least none that went against Konoha's best interests. However, this was the perfect time to get rid of him. Even better was that the rest of the cage realized this as well. And you're sure that Sasuke can even find this guy? Even I've heard of Shimura Danzo. My grandfather heard of him as well. Still, if the Uchiha's life is in danger, then shouldn't he be provided with backup? Assuming it's an Otsutsuki that takes him out, do we really need one finding Shimura Danzo as well? Kuretsuchi inquired. Gaara leaned forward, putting his elbows on the table. Shimura Danzo is known for having a wide network and having very crude, yet effective methods. Before the elemental nations were remade, I heard plenty of reports that the councilman of Konoha was found in neighboring towns and villages near Suna. I believe that such a large manhunt would only alert him. It's necessary to keep the force as small as possible. However, I'm a little inclined to agree that we should recall Uchiha Sasuke. If he's defeated by whatever force this is, it could provide others a gauge for our strength. They might think they can attack us again, especially with a greater force, Gaara replies. Mei leaned back in her chair, brushing a piece of hair from her face. Perhaps, but we are shinobi. We do not run away from death. We also can't just hide. They will be coming eventually. Besides, I believe Naruto would have already set countermeasures in place to protect Uchiha Sasuke. Additionally, I believe we've all gotten the chance to see how the young Uchiha does things. He doesn't seem the type to be coddled. Naruto, did they offer you any other information? She asked. Naruto shook his head. None that we didn't already know. Aside from the fact Kagura told me those two Otsutsuki are different from ordinary Otsutsuki, I don't know much else. Though, she just told me, the Otsutsuki wouldn't send more than 5 or 6 Otsutsuki to deal with us at the moment. They're very egotistical like that, Naruto answered. Then are you at least confident in whoever you sent to guard him? One of your summons was already subdued, right? What's to stop this one from being taken down too? Kuretsuchi inquired. Naruto was getting ready to answer before the Raikage interjected. A moment. Before anything else, have you confirmed that he's alive? He could have been one of those who turned into Jashin's little demonic army. Spirits listen to you, don't they? I asked. Naruto glanced off to the side for a moment. Give me a minute, the blonde replied before he quickly closed his eyes and concentrated the Honsho through his body. He slowly absorbed the divine spiritual energy around him and entered his Death Sage mode. Shimura Danzo, stand before me immediately, Naruto ordered, pushing his voice throughout the realm of the Shinigami. His eyes narrowed when he noticed the old Warhawk appear before him. He frowned momentarily, especially when he took in Danzo's state. Even for those spirits who stepped before him, they usually approached with a whole body, perfect as they should have been in their old age. Yet, Danzo looked incredibly worse for wear. What happened to him? Gari asked in surprise. It seemed to be a question that no one else had the answer to. Shockingly, even Kagura took notice of the man's state. Her pupil-less eyes took in his decrepit form. Being as old as she was, especially before Kagaya even stepped on this planet, Kagura had seen many things. However, just as many things had she forgotten as well. Being the princess of the Otsutsuki main branch, she had become rather acquainted with those of the main branch family. Of course, that could have changed over the centuries that she'd been gone, but she knew a main branch member's work when she saw one. Either this is the work of a Shiki, or there is another member of the main branch that has come upon your world, Kagura said, which made the frown on Naruto's face deepen. He surveyed Danzo's soul. Bits and pieces of it were missing and others were a mangled mess. He looked more like a grotesque ghoul than a human being. He was unnaturally skinny, like he hadn't eaten a day in his life. His eyes were devoid of all life. Nearly every spirit that Naruto had seen, no matter how bad their end was, had some life left in their gaze. Danzo just had nothing. Whatever happened to him, it must have been horrific. He's even standing like he's comatose, Dan claimed. While the others continued to talk amongst themselves, Kurama and Pakura continued to survey the former Konoha Warhawk. Whoever did this seems to have some understanding of the realm of the Shinigami. They were likely experimenting on Danzo-san for a long time. If not for his death, I'd assume it was Orochimaru. People like him tend to leave their victims alive as long as possible. However, this is even more macabre than what the Sannin is used to, Pakura uttered. After a moment, Naruto spoke. Shimura Danzo, when did you die? Naruto asked. I do not remember, Shikyo-sama. He didn't remember. Of all the things, Naruto was expecting that wasn't one of them. His other summons glanced at each other before the Kyuubi Jinchuriki addressed Danzo again. Who killed you? Naruto inquired. I do not remember, Shikyo-sama. Where did you die? I do not remember, Shikyo-sama. Where did you live? I do not remember, Shikyo-sama. Which village deserves to rule over the others? I do not know, Shikyo-sama. What is your name? Shimura Danzo, Shikyo-sama. Suiren floated over to Pakura. So he only remembers his own name. Are we sure that Naruto-sama didn't pick a different Danzo? There may be people with the same name and surname, the former Kiri Kunoichi explained. Suiren didn't really believe this herself, but there had to be some reason this guy didn't know anything. If that were the case, then numerous men claiming the name of Shimura Danzo would have come forward when Naruto called for the name. Notice when he called only one appeared. This has to be the man that we're looking for. As for why he doesn't seem to remember anything, that is a mystery in itself. Unless, you know, Morio answered, turning one of his numerous heads toward Kagura. The princess of the Otsutsuki continued to look upon the pitiful state of Shimura Danzo. This certainly reeked of a Shiki's work, yet this was much more barbaric than she remembered. It could be that he didn't have Otsutsuki resources, so he was forced to undertake these crude methods, yet there was a masterful aspect to this crudeness. This would be a Shiki's work. I am unsure how he's done it, but he's perfected the technique of spirit corruption. Your Sharingan and illusion arts are diluted products of this technique. Even when I had been free, not many Otsutsuki had mastered this technique. Ashiki conquered the mind of Shimura Danzo and extracted every piece of his chakra. He then reshaped it and implanted his own into Danzo, overriding the very soul and all that makes it up. We have made use of this to subtly invade more troublesome worlds. Use of the Kama was always an Otsutsuki's last resort, especially since we prefer not to mingle with lower lifeforms. This might be Shimura Danzo, yet he is simply a husk of whatever creature any of you knew. Body destroyed, soul conquered, and spirit crushed, there is nothing left of him save his own name. Quote. There's seriously something wrong with you, Otsutsuki. Each and every one of you. The others remained quiet against the full weight of Naruto's chill tone. He didn't scream at Kagura. He didn't condemn her either. He just let his anger stew as he stared at what Danzo had become. Oh, believe him, he had no personal love for Danzo. The man was better off dead as far as Naruto was concerned, yet even this. After a moment, Naruto held up his hand. He then covered it in the violet flames of the end. He then grabbed Danzo's head, covering the old warhawk in the burning flames. As far as Naruto knew, these flames were supposed to hurt. He'd experienced just a portion of their strength when he fought Jashin. It was supposed to be soul-crushing, spirit-breaking agony. Yet, Danzo didn't even mutter a single scream. Even as his very spirit was burned to cinders, never even to be revived. All that was Shimura Danzo would never appear again. Pakura, I'd like you to do something for me, Naruto said, shocking the others when he addressed the former Suna Kunoichi, none more so than her. It wasn't exactly difficult to know that the road for them both was still rocky, much better than before yet not where it was before. Pakura bowed. Yes, Shikyo-sama, she said. She then continued to nod as Naruto fed her information and plans. Once he was done, she quickly flew out of his sword. It will be done, Naruto-sama, Pakura claimed. She then flew through the building ceiling and blasted off in the direction of Sasuke's signature, covering miles of land in a few moments. The others were strangely very silent before Naruto dismissed them. Kagura didn't see what the point of the summoner's anger was. Then again, she also didn't really care to know either. If this Shimura Danzo was weak enough to be captured by Ashiki, then his life was meaningless anyway. After all,